In an instant, tens of thousands of monks of the Sacred Wind Army calmed down. Yi Tian continued, the number of formal disciples recruited this time is 2,000. There is no limit to the realm of cultivation, but you need to complete a task. Everyone listened quietly. Everyone knew that there were some dangerous tasks mentioned by Yi Tian. It must not be a simple thing. Let go of your mind, you can see those boundless dark red things hundreds of miles away. This kind of thing is called Jiajin. The breath you feel now is the breath of Jiajin, but at this distance, this breath will not have any impact on the monks. You are safe. If you are eroded by the breath of Jiajin at a close distance, it will make people crazy and lose their identity, sex, accomplishments fall, and even eventually fall. Yi Tian continued, this is a very terrible thing, but we should make good use of it. It is also a treasure to defeat the enemy and defeat the enemy. It can also cause fatal damage to the place. The mission of the palace leader is to require 2,000 people to collect the looting embers at close range. Each person will collect 5 zumaji, a total of 10,000 zumaji looting embers. Hearing Yi Tian say here, many kamikaze sergeants looked at each other and couldn't help hesitating. If, as Lord Yi Tiangong said, the looting embers are so terrible, it will be a near death to collect the looting embers. Even if you successfully collect the looting embers of Waksumaji, and then successfully join the Maitreya Palace and become an official disciple of the Maitreya Palace, what can you do? Most people have similar ideas in mind, so it's really difficult to do such a dangerous task. Palace leader, disciples are willing to accept this task. At this time, a middle-aged monk suddenly came out of the crowd. There was only the middle level of Jindan. He walked all the way from the space of the queue to the front and said loudly, "What's your name?" Yi Tian smiled, nodded, and asked. Back to the palace master, the disciple's name is Qin Feng, the friar immediately replied. Then it's up to you to count the time. In the 30 breath time, if many people are willing to take part in the task, how many people will take part? If there is not enough people, formal disciples will sign up voluntarily. Start counting now. Yi Tian originally wanted to briefly say something about the treasure clothes, but Qin Feng was the first to stand up and accept the task under such circumstances. He changed his mind. Not only did he hide the treasure clothes, but he didn't even mention the matter of refining and robbing water. 1, 2, 3. With Yi Tian's orders, Qin Feng immediately started timing. Disciples also accept this task. Disciples also accept. Qin Feng counted a number every time he breathed. Starting from 3, people came out of the queue and stood behind Qin Feng. 28. 29. 30. No matter what happens to the scene, no matter who comes out of the queue, no matter how many people come out, he counts his time from beginning to end, with extremely uniform intervals. When he counted 30, he stopped. As Yi Tian ordered, he only gave me 30 minutes to rest. I don't have to count anymore. Glancing at the hundreds of monks who came out within 30 seconds, Yi Tian said to Qin Feng without expression, Qin Feng counts the number of people. Report back to the palace master, a total of 693 people, but unexpectedly, Qin Feng didn't count it at all, but opened his mouth and replied. Well, another 1307 people are needed. Who is the official disciple of the palace willing to take part in this task? Yi Tian naturally knows how many people come out. Counting the number is only a routine procedure, but Qin Feng's move made him look at this person more. After taking back his eyes, Yi Tian continued. I will. Disciples are willing to participate. Nieba, Duanjingxiu and other disciples of Gon Yetian, as well as those Kunlun practitioners, stood up one after another. These people have seen with their own eyes that Yi Tian prepared looting water to dispel the smell of looting for the friars in the wild spirit domain. They know that looting embers is nothing to Yi Tian. In particular, those Kunlun practitioners were originally contaminated with the smell of robbery and destruction, which Yi Tian removed for them. Moreover, they have been contaminated with the smell of robbery and destruction for a long time and deep into the bone. The difficulty is at the level of ashes, which is not comparable to removing it immediately after being contaminated. Therefore, they have strong confidence in Yi Tian's means. The joining of these pro-disciples and Kun Lashio immediately ignited the atmosphere of the whole audience. Immediately, some disciples even had no time to say anything, so they flashed and stood up.
Stop! Enough, people! After counting his breath, Tian suddenly shouted.
At this time, some disciples were in the air.
Tian's voice fell, and their bodies fell in the queue.
Well, a total of 2087 people, that's all.
Tian Dao didn't drive the extra people away, but nodded and said.
Seeing so many formal disciples come forward enthusiastically, those kamikaze friars who first signed up for the mission can't help but breathe a long sigh. Although the reasons for their coming forward are different, they all have some gambling ingredients. Now it seems that they have a greater chance of winning. You 693 kamikaze sergeants are official disciples of the Maitreya Palace from now on, and all the resources are completely the same as those of the official disciples, Tian said to those kamikaze sergeants who stood up.
Thank you, Palace Leader. These people were delighted when they heard the speech. How is it different from what they just said?
Clearly Tian said that only after completing the task can he become an official disciple of the Maitreya Palace.
Now just stand up? Duan Jingxiu.
Tian ignored the reaction of those people and called out his second disciple in the crowd.
Disciple is here. Duan Jingxiu stepped out of the line.
Immediately distribute cultivation resources to these new disciples and distribute a treasure coat to each one. Equip them with a magic weapon of half-immortal soldiers, Tenglong armor and 100 pieces of immortal jade, regroup them and stay in the field cave for twice the time. All the disciples participating in this task will be distributed with 2 auxiliary cultivation pills according to their cultivation level.
Tian continued.
Yes. Duan Jingxiu agreed and immediately summoned people to start distributing resources. Because of the large number of staff, the allocation of all resources did not take much time, and the scene returned to calm again.
Those kamikaze army sergeants who have become formal disciples of the Maitreya Palace are very happy. They are very satisfied that they can become formal disciples.
Now I got 2 additional pills, which is a great surprise. In addition to resource factors, they are also more stable because of Tian's arrangement. The Maitreya Palace will not give so many resources to dying people or waste. It can be inferred indirectly that there is certainly not much risk in taking over the task of robbing embers this time.
For them, this is a desirable thing. Qin Feng. When the resources are distributed, Tian looks at Qin Feng. The disciple is here.
Hearing the palace leader's greeting, Qin Feng was shocked and hurried out of the line and bowed to salute.
You should answer truthfully. Why do you want to stand up and take the task? Tian asked in a low voice.
Tell the palace leader that the disciple stood up for 2 reasons. First, the disciple is very eager to become an official disciple of the palace. Second, the disciple thinks that since the palace leader has arranged this task, there will be follow-up arrangements, and we will never die in vain. Qin Feng replied without hesitation.
Yes, you are very smart.
Qin Feng, because you were the first to stand up and take over the task of robbing embers regardless of the danger, our palace leader appreciated you very much.
Now you are the 20th pro-disciple. Would you like to?
Tian nodded a few words of appreciation, but then suddenly said.
Ah! Qin Feng was stunned.
He couldn't believe his ears. The palace leader wanted to accept his disciples.
How could it be?
The disciples recently accepted by the palace master, from the old 16 to the old 19, are all spiritual cultivation, and they are all the masters of one sect, which is beyond people's expectation.
He looked at Tian for a moment and didn't dare to answer.
He was afraid that he had auditory hallucinations.
Don't you want to be the personal disciple of the palace master? Tian asked again with a smile.
Yes, the disciples can't wait. The master is on the top and the disciples worship 3 times. At this time, Qin Feng really confirmed that what he heard was not false. The palace leader really wanted to accept himself as his own disciple. He hurriedly knelt down and respectfully kowtowed to Tian 3 times. The scene caused an uproar. Such a pie in the sky actually fell on this unknown Qin Feng. Especially those sergeants who still stand in the Sacred Wind Army, their hearts are mixed. Not long ago, Qin Feng, like them, was a sergeant of the Sacred Wind Army. It was an extravagant hope to enter the Maitreya Palace and become a formal disciple, but in the twinkling of an eye, he ascended to heaven and became a personal disciple of the palace master. There are more than 100,000 disciples in the Maitreya Palace, but the palace leader's own disciples in Qin Feng are only 20. Many kamikaze sergeants have endless regrets in their hearts and constantly curse themselves. Why didn't they stand up? It's clear that Lord Yi has given everyone a chance, but they didn't stand up. Isn't it because of fear of death? However, now Lord Yi has accepted Qin Feng as his own disciple. How could he let Qin Feng die? Moreover, most of the first to take the initiative to participate in this task are Lord Ye's own disciples. What about this? If I had stood up without hesitation at that time, wouldn't it be me who became a pro-disciple? Even if you are not the first to stand up, you can at least become a formal disciple within 30 breath, with envious cultivation resources. When these people secretly regretted, they heard Yi Tian say here, "Old 20, go and meet your senior brothers and sisters." Yes, Master. Qin Feng quickly agreed. He could feel that his voice was sweet. Ha ha, Miaba, elder martial brother, you don't need to introduce. Younger martial brother, this is 200,000 fairy jade. Take it as a small gift. At this time, Miaba came over, patted Qin Feng on the shoulder and said, and then handed him a shumi ring. Qin Feng excitedly picked it up and thanked Miaba. Next, many disciples came one by one, met Qin Feng according to the established rules, and gave them expensive gifts. Those who send fairy jade follow Miaba, with 200,000 all the same, and others send pills and half-immortal soldiers magic weapons. When Liao Tungwen came here, although he was only the 16th, after all, as the leader of a sect, the current head of the Taisho branch of the Miluo Palace, who was more generous, he directly gave Qin Feng a bottle of pills, a total of 6. Situ Juanru and Morong Chanshan are the fairy jade given, 1 million fairy jade per person. These scenes made the soldiers of the Sacred Wind Army look straight. Until now, they really know what benefits they will have besides becoming the personal disciple of Lord Yi. Apart from the master of the palace master, these disciples of the palace master play an important role in the Maitreya Palace. Anyone can relax his hands and don't worry about resources anymore. What's more, even Bihuan, who is cultivated in the cave, has a lot of resources because Yi Tianqiu is a disciple. Lord Yi will still be poor for Qin Feng. Lost the opportunity. Countless people are grieving. But it's too late to say anything. They miss opportunities again and again. Every time the opportunity comes, they don't grasp it. Who can blame? This scene is very similar to when Lord Yi asked them to make a choice in the Valley of the Holy Spirit domain. On the other side, Yi Tian just looked at the scene quietly, with an indifferent smile on his face. Taking Qin Feng as his own disciple is not to take a fancy to this person's cultivation qualification. His cultivation qualification can only be described in general. All accepted him just because he was the first to stand up. It's just a means for Yi Tian to control the Maitreya Palace. He wants everyone to see the opportunity, and this opportunity comes from absolute obedience to himself and the active implementation of every command. Even in the face of danger, he rushed out regardless of any cost. Yi Tian knows very well that most people are selfish and have their own interests, whether they worship themselves as teachers or join the Maitreya Palace. There are no people who don't think about themselves. The so-called thinking about others is mostly done within their ability. It is not ruled out that some special existence and special feelings will sacrifice themselves to complete others, but such people are only a few, not universal. So are Morong Chanshan, Liao Tungwen, and Situ Juanru. They all have their own interests. This is human nature, and Yi Tian can't change it. Even the eldest disciple Miaba and the second disciple Duan Jingxiu were in this situation. Shenron follows him. Naturally, there are reasons for his longevity and promotion. This is the fact. It is human nature. It is a normal thing. Yi Tianai to the Maitreya Palace is the one who is needed. Yi Tian couldn't have foolishly thought that the disciples of the Maitreya Palace would be completely in personal feelings, with life and death for themselves and the Maitreya Palace. The strategy he adopted was to combine kindness and prestige, reward and punishment, bind the interests of most people with the interests of the Maitreya palace, and form a joint force to make both losses and prosperity. Only in this way can everyone consciously safeguard the overall interests of the Maitreya palace. In the final analysis, individuals consider their own interests, while the Maitreya considers the interests of the Maitreya. If these interests are all in the same direction, it is the best result. Taking Qin Feng is to let everyone see his absolute authority in the Maitreya palace. One word can make people die and one word can also make people progress. Let everyone know that a thing that may be inadvertent may be a great opportunity. If you miss it, you can only miss it and never come back. We have to wait for the next opportunity, and the wolf has more meat and less meat, and the opportunity is limited. If we want the opportunity, we can only rush forward without hesitation. Just like Qin Feng in front of him, he seized this opportunity. When others were still hesitating and retreating, he rushed up first. As a result, the return to him is unimaginable. Fairy Jade alone has reached millions, not to mention that you can use the elixir to improve your skills right away. These cultivation resources alone are definitely something that an ordinary monk in the golden elixir realm can't dream of. At this time, after Qin Feng officially met with many senior brothers and sisters, he bowed to Tian and stood back in front of the queue. Tian glanced at the sergeant of the Sacred Wind Army with different looks, and then said, "Just now I just talked about the horror of robbing embers." As the 20-year-old Qin Feng said, the leader of the palace will not let the disciples in the palace die for nothing. Because the Maitreya palace has mastered the method to dissolve the robbing breath. Kunlun monks have been eroded by the robbing breath and have been completely eliminated, leaving no negative impact. At this point, there was a sound of stamping and sighing from the Sacred Wind Army. Originally, they thought that these people who stood up might not die. Lord Yi must have strategies to deal with them. They had guessed in their hearts, but they guessed after all, and didn't sit down at last. When Tian said this himself, the situation was different immediately. This is a real result. As the leader of the palace and facing the infection of robbing and killing breath, he can't talk freely. But why didn't the palace leader say it earlier? Isn't it just the smell of robbing embers? As long as it can be completely removed, what's the big deal? Some people have this idea in mind. However, think about it. If you had said this earlier, all kamikaze troops would not have to rush out. How can they be screened and selected? That makes no sense. Anyway, the next time you have a chance, the palace leader will say whatever he wants. Even if the palace leader says, he will be the first to rush out, even if he knows he will die. I believe the palace leader will not let these people die in vain. Tests are everywhere, and opportunities are always left to those who are prepared. Many kamikaze sergeants are secretly determined to show their indomitable, fearless and obedient side in front of the palace master at any time. However, Tian didn't give these people too much time to sigh. He paused and continued, "What I said before is only the worst result. It is eroded by the looting breath and then removed. According to the calculation of the palace leader, this treasure dress refined by Shenin stone has the function of resisting the looting breath in theory, but it has not been verified in practice. The best result is to wear this treasure dress, collect the looting embers, and then have no impact." These words have just landed, and sad and thorny sighs appear again in the kamikaze sergeant queue, one after another, mixed together, which is extremely obvious. Once this situation is established, does it not mean that the task will be completed and there may be no damage? Those people's hearts were repeatedly impacted by Tian's words, forming a strong heart gap, and they couldn't help worrying about gain and loss. Nieba, distribute 5 shumi rings to each person and go to collect the looting embers. The dozens of friars in the spirit realm of Rose kill at will, and all the booty belongs to themselves. Tian said after introducing it, pointing to the distance. Friar Duanjing is the first treasurer. In addition to the resources in Tian's hands, another part of the resources of the Maitreya Palace are in his hands. In the First World War on the lakeside, more than 500,000 local monks were completely annihilated, and all Zumaji were captured. After the seized resources were counted and sorted out, there were more than 300,000 Zumaji alone, so 10,000 Zumaji was nothing at all. He took out the Shumi ring and gave it to Nieba, and began to distribute it here.
Yi Tian ignored the situation here.
His body flashed to the ground and ordered Murong Chanshan, Liao Tungwen, Situjuanru and Xian Run to arrange people to clean up the Huafan stone and Huafan stone plate in each cave and spirit beast ring. He also went aside and cleaned the Huafan stone and the spirit beast ring himself. For a moment, the upper and lower levels of the Maitreya palace performed their respective duties and began to be busy. A few moments later, Zumaju was assigned, and more than 2,000 monks set out to fly hundreds of miles away where the ashes were. There, dozens of local friars in the spirit region of Rose, who had been chased and killed in order to avoid the Maitreya palace, went out of the place covered by the looting embers and came to the periphery of the looting embers. It seems that those of them are not in good condition. Affected by the smell of robbery, they all look weak. In their thoughts, they sense that more than 2,000 disciples of the Maitreya palace flew here quickly.
They didn't take any action until they clearly saw Nieba and others in their sight.
They slowly got up and flew to the depths of the burning embers.
Still want to go?
In the crowd, Yuaning territory Kunlun Shoko made a cold hum, a pair of meat wings behind him suddenly slapped, and the man had disappeared from his place.
Elder Marshal Brother Ko, slow down. Then dozens of Kunlun practitioners also flew out of the queue and caught up.
There were some disciples who wanted to kill the local friars in the Rosling realm.
They couldn't help but stop their bodies. The Kunlun practitioners they chased out were all Yuaning territory accomplishments, and they were very fast. Even if they rushed there, they would have cleaned the battlefield by the time they arrived. At this time, Nieba in front of the queue suddenly said, "Fellow disciples, the palace master said that the treasure clothes can resist the robbing and killing breath. It is only a theoretical inference, but it has not been really tested. You should collect the robbing embers faster this time. If the treasure clothes do not resist the robbing and killing breath, the shorter the time you stay in the robbing embers, the lighter the robbing and killing breath will be and the easier it will be to recover. Remember this." Yes, the people thought what Nieba said was very reasonable. They agreed one after another, began to separate, flew to different areas, and quickly collected the dark red embers. A little deeper into the place where the embers were robbed, the 30 or 40 local friars in the spirit region of Rose shouted loudly as they fled to the depths of the embers. "God, what are those guys with wings? How can they be so fast?" a tall local friar shouted after Kunlun monk who quickly chased after him. "It doesn't matter what it is. Whoever can lure them into the fire of death will win. Although not all of them can be lured in, it's enough to bury more than 2,000 people with them," another person nearby shouted. "No, what are they doing? Are they collecting the fire of death? Are they crazy?" another man in the crowd exclaimed. "No matter what, fly in quickly and let them catch up as much as possible," the man who first spoke said coldly. Up to now, under the influence of looting embers, that is, what they call the fire of death, their mana has weakened a lot, and they even worry a lot. For them, this is a situation of death. As warriors of the Almighty sect, they took great risks and brought enough benefits to their families, just to lure many friars of the Shueihua sect into the space channel leading to the Guanghan spiritual region. Thinking about burying these hateful black-eyed friars in the collapsed space channel when passing through the space channel, but people are not as good as heaven. They don't know that even if they don't play those tricks, Yi Tian and his gang will also enter the space channel, because their goal is the Earth Star. It was their last and most helpless choice to lure the friars of Shueihua sect into the ashes, because there was no way back. They believe that the current space channel must have collapsed by the same door of the Almighty sect, so as to cut off the possibility of the Watermoon sect friar returning to the Rose spirit realm. Similarly, these warriors who lured the enemy into the depths will never return to the spirit realm of Rose. This is an isolated army. Their only purpose is to lure more water and moon friars into the ashes and then die together. Although the abacus is very good and they are brave enough, these blonde Rose spirit territory native Shoshue have made a wrong abacus. When they flew more than 10 miles, suddenly the figure in front of them flashed, and the dozens of friars with meat wings on their backs had caught up, suddenly appeared in front of them and stopped the way. "You fools, although you have reached the realm of Yuanying, you will also be buried in the fire of death. Have you and your companions finally been fooled? Unexpectedly? When you came, you were fine, but you can't go back. If you want to return to the spirit realm of Rose again, that's a dream.
Knowing that to this extent, they have tried their best. They are stained with the smell of the fire of death, which has doomed their fall. Rather than being tortured to death slowly by the fire of death, they might as well die in the hands of these winged friars. However, before they die, they have no choice in force, but in their mouth, these blonde friars want to beat them hard. Hit these winged friars. Looking at these self-righteous blonde friars who were already unbearable in the First World War, Lord Ko laughed and said, "You people are fools.
Do you really think we came to Guanhan spiritual region because of your deception?
To tell you the truth, we originally wanted to pass through the space channel to Earthstar.
You know?
Look up, it's the blue planet overhead, where our ancestral star is."
Did you expect to take the space channel?
Ko Yuanshuan's words stunned dozens of blonde friars.
Originally, some ferocious faces suddenly turned into a dead gray color. They could see that what Ko Yuanshuan said should be true, because the pleasure from the heart could not be pretended.
If so, the significance of their entering the Guanhan spirit realm will be greatly reduced.
But even so, the burly almighty friar gritted his teeth again and said, "So what?
You had better go back to your Earthstar, but now you have fallen into the fire of death by mistake.
I'm afraid you don't know what a terrible existence it is?
Although we have no way to live, you more than 2,000 people will be buried with us."
"How? Now do you regret? Are you afraid?" Ha ha.
In the end, many almighty friars laughed and regained their ferocious look again. Ko Yuanshuan and others did not speak, but looked at the almighty friars who were still at a dead end with strange eyes, full of ridicule. Such an expression made the other party's laughter stop gradually. "Isn't it shocking that you don't believe what I said?" asked the burly almighty friar with a few twitches on his cheek.
"You're just a group of frogs at the bottom of a well. What else do you say about the fire of death? I'm afraid only you ignorant people will call it that.
This kind of thing is called jiajin, which is only lethal to people like you.
Open your eyes and see if I have been affected at all." Ko Yuanshuan sneered and said, "You are looking at our people. What are they doing?
For you, this kind of thing is a disaster, but for us, it is an extremely precious wealth.
Now I should ask you, do you regret entering this cold spiritual realm? Impossible, how can it be?
How can you not be affected?" Many incompetent friars looked at the friars who collected the looted embers again. They saw that their actions were clean and neat, and the dark red fire of death continued to fly into Shumi Ring and Yuan. No one had a panic look on his face, nor did he see that anyone's mana became weak due to the influence of the fire of death.
How could it be?
How could it be? The face of the monks of the almighty sect suddenly turned into a dead gray color again. It seems that they did not have any value when they came here. They just wanted to die by themselves.
Can it be like this? Believe it or not, in a word, it's time to send you on the road.
Ko Yuanshuan said, his body moving, his 5 fingers like electricity, grabbed at the bottom of the burly universal parcel. When his fingers were about to touch each other's body, 5 sharp claws suddenly appeared on his fingertips, which tore the man to pieces with a bang. The others also started their own hands at this time. A burst of flesh and blood flew, and the battle was over.
There is no suspense about Yuanying and Jindan. After collecting Zumaji, these Kunlun practitioners didn't even have the interest to take a look.
They put it away directly, and then separated to collect the looted embers.
Maybe when you're idle and bored, you'll see what's in it. At this time, hundreds of miles away, Tian has entered a huge magic weapon cave.
Next to him is a magic weapon cave of normal size, which is magnified in the big cave. It is the first experimental object. Moron clearly does not know the time field. Standing in front of the gate of the magic weapon cave, Tian saw that Moron kept issuing signals and losing orders, and commanded the disciples of the field branch to carry out some simple preparations.
She was too busy to look around, and even didn't notice Tian's arrival. All attention was focused on the field. In the field, Tian is an expert.
After only looking at it for a moment, he left this magic weapon cave. According to what he has seen so far, it is really possible for this talented field master to arrange 5 times the time field. This woman is really the treasure of the Maitreya Palace.
In front of the gate of the cave, Tian pondered and left 4 martial spirit puppets in the later stage of Yuanying territory to guard here. There are many people and great power. The Huathan stone in each magic weapon cave has been basically removed, and the cleaned Huathan stone has been reloaded into Shumi Ring. At present, only the disciples of Xian Run and the Royal Beast Division are still busy. Because the number of monsters is too large, there are too many corresponding spirit beast rings, the amount of Huathan stones is large, and the task of cleaning up is also heavy. Fortunately, the Royal Beast Division has a large number of disciples, and the Xian Run realm is high. It goes on fairly quickly. It should be finished in a short time. The Divine Mind covered hundreds of miles away and carefully sensed the disciples who collected the looted embers. A moment later, from the current situation of those people, Tian could confirm. The treasure clothes could indeed block the breath of looted embers. That's easy to say. Tian took a long breath, looked up at the huge blue planet in the sky and began to meditate. A moment later, he said, Old 16, Old 17, Old 19. Master. Liao Tongwen, Situ Juanru and Murong Chanshan heard the call and immediately came to Tian from different directions. Arrange disciples equipped with treasure clothes to take 100,000 Shumi precepts from your second senior brother and put them all on the looting embers. Now you can be sure that the treasure clothes can block the breath of looting embers. There's no need to worry about it. Tian said directly. Sure Fu. I'm curious. What's the use of taking so many looted embers? If it's used to refine utensils, it won't use so many looted embers. Situ Juanru hesitated and asked. Morong Chanshan and Liao Tongwen also looked curiously at Master Tian. Tian raised his eyebrows and said, You can do whatever you want. It's just in the plan of being a teacher. If there's a secret, you can't easily reveal it. You'll know it by then. Let's do it. It is filled with 100,000 sutras. For the same person, 5 sutras need to be collected by 20,000 people at the same time. Situ Juanru took out more than 1,000 treasure clothes recently refined and distributed them to the disciples of the Maitreya Palace. Then, together with Murong Chanshan and Liao Tongwen, he greeted the disciples assigned to the treasure clothes and flew to the ashes hundreds of miles away. Before, Tian was not sure whether the treasure clothes could resist the smell of robbing embers, so it was impossible to send a large number of people. Robbing embers must be taken, because although there are robbing embers in Kunlun Mountain, the number is obviously insufficient. But too many people rush to take the looted embers. Once they are attacked by the looted breath, the amount of chemical looted water will be very large. And 2,000 people, completely within the range that Tian can bear. But now it's different. Treasure clothes can completely isolate the smell of robbery. Then pack as many as possible. Of course, the more, the better. A huge scene of collecting embers is rapidly taking shape. From a distance, there are a sea of people, and there are monks collecting embers everywhere. More than 2 hours later, disciples returned one after another and put the ring full of looted embers on the ground designated by Tian. As the number of people coming back gradually increased, the number of zumaji on the ground continued to increase, slowly uplifting into a hill-like shape. Until finally, all the people sent out returned, and 110,000 Shumi rings were piled up in a big pile. All the disciples enter the magic weapon cave and are ready to go to the Earth Star. Tian took out an empty Shumi ring, put in the 110,000 Shumi rings with looted embers, waved and said. Then he looked at Qin Feng, Old 20, You enter the magic weapon cave where the second senior brother is located. Thank you, Master. Qin Feng bowed excitedly to Tian, but he sighed in his heart. He didn't expect that Master was so careful and considered such a small matter so thoroughly. Otherwise, he really didn't know which cave to enter. If you go back to Sergeant Kamikaze's cave again, you won't be able to live up to your face. With Tian's reminder, Nieba made proper arrangements for the newly recruited hundreds of disciples and inserted them into different caves. Although Nieba looks rude, he is still very careful when doing things. Old 17, take out your best flying magic weapon. When only Tian and several disciples were left, Tian looked at Situ Juanru. Shifu, this is a half-immortal soldier flying magic weapon specially made by the disciple for the master's father. It is driven by 16 top-grade Immortal Jade. The opening speed can surpass the peak friars in the realm of God, but it is still much slower than the speed of the Golden Eye Divine Carving to display the power of Heaven's Spirit Wing. Because there is the Golden Eye Divine Carving, the disciple didn't take it out to show his ugliness. Situjuan Regressed at the speech, took out a dish flying magic weapon and handed it to Tian. This flying magic weapon has been brewing for a long time. In addition to its fast speed, the disciple can also change the size at will. The size can be determined completely according to the needs until the limit. Another important advantage is its flexibility. This treasure has no head and tail. Any direction can be used as the head. Change the direction without adjusting the magic weapon angle. You can directly change the flight direction, the performance is not affected at all. It's just that after refining this magic weapon, it hasn't got a suitable name. Tian took this dish-shaped flying magic weapon and felt it for a while. There was no divine thought mark on it. The original mark should have been removed by Situjuan. The divine mind covered it. Tian quickly stamped the divine mind and recognized the Lord. Then a magic power hit it. The dish-flying magic weapon changed rapidly and didn't stop until its diameter was more than 3 feet. Such a big space is bigger than his original Dun Tizot. After zooming in, the respective symbols on the top can be seen more clearly. Tian glanced at many runes, and then another mana gently hit a rune, and the flying saucer immediately became smaller. Then Tian tried several times, gradually mastered the change law of flying magic weapon, and then tried the defense shield. After some experiments, Tian felt very satisfied. He didn't even pick out any defects. Yes, this treasure is called a UFO. Tian said casually. Well, that's a good name. Master said casually that he had such a classic name. Situjuan praised it again and again. So Morong Chanxian and Liao Tungwen couldn't help turning their heads and covering their heads. Tian waved his hand and said, "Old 17, don't flatter me. I'm very satisfied with this magic weapon. The name naturally comes from my mouth. It's not necessarily exquisite, but it's very vivid. This shape is actually the most scientific. I'm just worried that once it appears on the Earth star, it may cause a sensation. That's the last word, not to mention. There is a thick smell of burning ashes in the sky. The Golden Eye God carving has no treasure clothes, so I'll take it. Come down, you go back to the cave and prepare yourself. As a teacher, you will take you back to the Earth star. Perhaps the next war will be more cruel than ever before." The flying saucer flew off the ground silently, like a light, disappearing rapidly in the sky. In the sky above the Guanghan spirit domain, because the time of robbing embers is too long, the terrible breath that is enough to destroy the vitality forms a thick breath belt, which wraps the Guanghan spirit domain. It took more than an hour for the UFO to rush out of the breath zone and into the endless void. In view, the blue planet above seems larger than before. Tian was getting closer and closer to the Earth star. He was so excited that after a long interstellar journey, he was finally going to return to his hometown. Thousands of feelings. For a time, he didn't know where to start. What he is most worried about is the current situation of the Earth star. Through the space-time tunnel, the time point of returning to the Earth star may have changed. I hope everything is still in time. Far away from the looting breath zone, Tian opens the UFO defense shield and calls out the Golden Eye carving. There are still many life or dark void cracks in the void here. The Golden Eye statue is undoubtedly the best choice. Take off the takeoff disc, and Tian sits on the back of the Golden Eye statue and continues to fly towards the blue planet. The speed of Golden Eye divine carving is much faster than that of flying saucer. It has the power of perspective. It can avoid the hidden void cracks by itself. Tian doesn't need to worry too much about the safety on the way. He could just take this opportunity to take the pill and cross-knee meditation on the back of the divine eagle to refine the medicine. In the boundless void, the Golden Eye divine eagle shows its heavenly wings, and its body flashes away. It appears in another void and disappears again. The Earth star is getting closer and closer in its continuous flight. I don't know how long it took. Tian estimated that there would be at least 5 or 6 days. The blue planet was no longer in the shape of a ball in his field of vision. But the vast and endless ground, the ground is no longer the same blue, and the color of the land is clear and discernible. Although the mountains and rivers still look very far away, they can be seen clearly in the line of sight. At this time, Yi Tianchang spit out a mouthful of turbidity, and his mind covered the ground. A moment later, he thought, and the golden-eye eagle dived in a certain direction according to his instructions. However, the golden-eye eagle appeared in front of a monk flying against the sword. This man is a male cultivator. When he saw a huge raptor in front of him, he quickly turned his flying sword and fled downward. No matter how fast this person is, how can he be so fast that he has reached the 6th level of the golden-eye god carving? The carving body slides, the carving claw grabs at the friar, clasps it on the other person's shoulder, grabs it in the air, and then throws it up. Yi Tian's gesture on the eagle's back moved, also clasped the man's shoulder and put him firmly on the eagle's back. Pa! Pa! Then, without saying a word, Yi Tian ordered several times on this man. The man immediately felt stiff and lost his ability to move. Yi! Elder Yi! Spare your life! Yi Tiangang wanted to search the soul and know about the Earth Star, but the friar suddenly said, and his eyes were full of panic. You know your last name is Yi? Yi Tian was shocked and didn't waste time asking each other, so he directly pressed his palm on the friar's head and began soul-searching. Don't kill me, Master Yi. The younger generation was also forced. The man only felt it tight in his head. It seemed that an invisible big hand held his head. His spirit felt a little lax and hurried to beg for mercy. Shut up, say one more word and kill you immediately. Yi Tianling drank and quickly looked at his memory. Then, Yi Tian's face changed, sometimes showing a relaxed expression, sometimes frowning, sometimes pursing his lips, and his face was like a layer of frost. More than an hour later, Yi Tian threw up his strength in his hand and shook the friar's head to pieces. Divine Eagle, speed up, he threw his body to the ground, and Yi Tian pointed in a certain direction and urged. Knowing that there must be an emergency, the golden-eye god eagle flapped its wings in the direction pointed by Yi Tian and flew away. Fortunately, I finally came back in time. On the golden-eye god carving, Yi Tian looked at the east and breathed out a long breath. The soul-searching just now really surprised him. The friar in the golden elixir realm who was searched for the soul was a disciple from the Danxia blessed land of Fengsu and Lingyu. He was regarded as an old enemy of Yi Tian. The reason why this person can recognize Yi Tian is that almost all the friars in Fengsu and spiritual region have almost known Yi Tian. In order to arrest Yi Tian, his portrait once covered the whole Fengsu and spiritual region. At that time, Yi Tian had quietly returned to Earth Star. Later, the friars in Fengsu and spirit domain suffered a disastrous defeat in Earth Star. Finally, the coming friars recognized Yi Tian and successfully returned to Fengsu and spirit domain. The news that Yi Tian is hiding in the Earth Star has quickly spread all over the spirit area. Hualing Valley, Danxia Blessed Land, Lingshu Blessed Land, Qingyuan Dongtian and other 8 Yi Tian's enemies have strengthened the space channel at all costs, and sent a large number of monks to Earth Star several times. He tried to kill Yi Tian completely before he grew up after his rebirth. Among them, the group with the highest realm has reached the cultivation of Yuanying realm. It is not clear how many people there are in Danxia Blessed Land, which is safe by Sohu. His task is to find Yi Tian's whereabouts and the so-called Immortal machine separately with some Jindan disciples of our sect. This is not China, but a country overseas. These things had been expected by Yi Tian. Yi Tian knew that Feng Siyuan's spirit domain would never give up. This kind of thing will come back sooner or later. These news did not cause Yi Tian's slightest surprise. What surprised Yi Tian was time. According to the time note of obtaining some things in this person's memory, up to now, it should be a year and 2 months after he ascended Xianshan and disappeared. In fact, Yi Tian reckons that it will be at least a year and 10 months since he ascended Xianshan. In other words, there is a deviation of at least 8 months in time. Perhaps this is the benefit brought to me by crossing the time-space tunnel, so that I can come back here 8 months in advance. Now, Yi Tian hurried on his way because he knew from the soul search that during this period, the friars in Fengsu and spirit domain were attacking the headquarters of the Maitreya Palace in Jiangnan City. It is reasonable to say that a large number of monks from Yuanying territory will come.
Even with the protection of the Protectorate field, the headquarters of the Maitreya Palace will not support too much time, but in fact, there have been unexpected changes for Yi Tian. A large number of Yuanying territory friars in Fengsuan spirit domain also entered the Earth Star, came to the headquarters of the Maitreya Palace and participated in the battle to defend the Maitreya Palace. The friar Dansha blessed land who was searched for the soul did not know the specific reason why the temple participated in the war, but Yi Tian knew it very well.
That's because of Il.
The news that Ir disappeared with himself must not be concealed from the temple. As the daughter of the temple lord, there must be a soul card of Ir's real name in the temple. The original soul card is not broken, which is enough to show that Ir is not dead, but her whereabouts are unknown.
Ir follows himself, and the temple must know it.
Now they are missing together and their whereabouts are unknown.
Ir's safety must depend on himself.
As for the Maitreya Palace, the temple can only protect it with all its strength. Otherwise, once you come back, you will find that the Maitreya Palace created by yourself has been destroyed, and the temple has no help. I'm afraid the Lord of the temple can't explain to you. After all, her daughter is still in her own hands. However, with the power of the temple, I'm afraid I can't fight the 8 sects in the square-inch spiritual domain at the same time. The top priority is to hurry back to the Maitreya Palace as soon as possible. As for the demon world and the underworld, the friar also knew something. Although there were changes in the demon world, the situation was not very serious. The most worrying thing is that in the underworld, the situation has deteriorated sharply. The dark fog in the Devil's Cave in northern Xinjiang is spreading rapidly and has covered a large area. Some Mingxiu began to get out of the dark fog on a small scale, and there have been several wars with the military. At present, the possible coverage of the dark fog is undergoing large-scale migration, countless people are forced to move out, and countless refugees rush to the south every day. Not to mention, from the man's memory, we know that the entrance of the demon world not only exists in northern Xinjiang, but also has 5 entrances of almost the same scale overseas. Similarly, the dark fog spreads rapidly and the battle continues. The Earth Star looks restless. Fortunately, the underworld may have adopted extremely conservative tactics in an attempt to cover the whole planet with the dark fog, rather than rush out of the dark fog to fight. Therefore, although the situation is critical, the actual personnel losses suffered by the Starlings are still very limited, but if the expansion of the underworld cannot be restrained, the consequences are absolutely unimaginable. Outside the city of Jiangnan, a fierce battle is going on outside the Maitreya Palace, which was founded not long ago.
To be exact, the Maitreya is being besieged by strong enemies.
200 or 300 square-inch spiritual friars in Yuanying territory severely bombarded the family protection array of the Maitreya Palace. These people were scattered outside the field within a radius of 6 or 7 miles. 20 or 30 people were divided into a group, and their magic weapons kept smashing into the violent shaking field shield. In the field, thousands of disciples of the Maitreya Palace held magic weapons and looked nervously at each other's crazy attack, with a decisive look on their faces. At the foot of the flying peak, 50 or 60 monks in Yuanying territory also looked at the crazy attack of the enemy, and their faces looked very dignified.
All Taoist friends, you have done your utmost to help hold the Maitreya Palace until now.
The arrival of the square-inch spiritual realm suddenly doubled the number of monks.
I'm afraid you can't escape this disaster this time. More than a dozen Taoist friends have been injured in the temple.
If Lord Yi is here, you don't want to suffer any more losses. When the field is broken, you can break through and don't have to go here again in the crowd. A burly man in Yuanying territory looked at the people around him and said that he was the palace-protecting beast of the Maitreya Palace.
The dragon demon.
It is precisely because Yi Tian gave him the refined pill that he has restored his cultivation to the midterm state of Yuanying territory in a short time. Unfortunately, Yi Tian suddenly disappeared and ran out of pills left to him, and the recovery of cultivation has stalled.
Otherwise, there may be a big entry.
The dragon demon said this, and the monks around him were silent. A moment later, a middle-aged monk in the later period of Yuanying territory, who was born with a long flowing beard, stroked his beard and said, "That's what the dragon Taoist friend said, but the Hall Lord has ordered that he must guard the integrity of the Mila Palace at any cost."
Feng Xiyuan's Spirit Realm Temple is also looking for ways to visit more and hire disciples.
Maybe if we hold on for a while, our reinforcements will come.
The dragon demon smiled bitterly. Lin Daoyu, during your daily communication, you also talked about the situation on the other side of the temple.
Although the temple was powerful, it was besieged by the 8 sections.
It was not easy. How could there be more strength to support the Maitreya Palace?
Instead of falling here, you might as well leave your living strength to avenge us.
Unfortunately, the old dragon was ashamed and failed to live up to God. You have not guarded the Maitreya Palace.
Boom. 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 While talking, the attack outside the field became more violent, and the strong field began to shake violently. It seems that if you continue to attack with such intensity, it is likely that the Maitreya Palace will be broken in a short time. Lin Zhua is the leader of the group of monks in the temple. They come to Earth Star. In addition to protecting the Maitreya Palace, they also bear another important task, that is, to find Yi Tian and Ir.
In terms of Feng Xuan's spiritual realm, the Lord of the Temple also sent people to look for Yi Tian's whereabouts, because he was worried that Yi Tian would return to Feng Xuan's spiritual realm on impulse, but after several investigations, he was as silent as a stone.
As Yi Tian expected, because Ir's original life soul card is not broken, but also crystal day by day, the Temple Lord can know that Ir is not in danger, and may still live very well. However, the Temple Lord is still very concerned about the loss of contact. He was sent to the Earth Star at a great cost by the Temple Lord. Lin Zhua and others have 2 major tasks, none of which has been completed so far, and more than a dozen fellow disciples have been seriously injured. They feel extremely frustrated. Originally, I thought that the cultivation of Yuanying territory should be enough for such a large number of strong people in the Earth Star. I just didn't expect that the square-inch spirit domain has paid more blood. Moreover, the original sects who had feuds with each other stopped fighting for the time being and joined hands because of the common goal of killing Yi Tian.
Long Daoyu, it's better to open another array door.
We'll suddenly fight out to temporarily curb the other party's attack. After thinking about it, Lin Zhua said.
When Yi Tian arranged this field, there were 8 students' gates in 8 different directions.
Without damaging the protection performance of the whole field, a new door can be opened arbitrarily for access.
It is said that Yi Tian left 8 students in order to avoid the tragic situation that the Maitreya Palace would be destroyed in such a crisis in the future.
The dragon demon is the only one who controls the opening method of these 8 students.
Who knows? Hearing Lin Zhua's proposal, the dragon demon shook his head decisively. Lin Daoyu, it's not necessary.
Although he was killed and delayed the other party's attack several times before, he was entangled by the other party, and the monks elsewhere would come to support soon. More than a dozen Taoist friends in the temple were also injured.
Lao Long doesn't want you to be hurt anymore.
Taoist friends of the temple, stop fighting tenaciously. You can leave as far as possible. We will never stop. Our goal is only the Maitreya Palace. At this time, amid the roaring attack, a cry came from outside the field. Lin Zhua looked at a monk who was attacking the array outside the field and shouted coldly, "What's the matter?
Are you afraid?
Even if you break through the palace protection field, it's a big fight of life and death.
You can't do it if you want to destroy the Mira Palace unharmed. Even if you die, I will take you on the back.
If you don't realize your mistakes, you'll kill the fish and break the net." The friar also snorted coldly, increased his mana, and constantly bombarded the field shield. Under the fierce attack, Nuada's field shield shook violently and was broken. At this time, a dark shadow appeared from the horizon. At the next moment, a huge golden eye divine carving had appeared outside the field.
God, it's God. God.
The dragon demon saw Yi Tian on the back of the golden eye eagle and cheered. Long Daoyu, open the field door and protect Yi Daoyu together.
His cultivation is too low.
Lin Zhua also saw Yi Tian. He subconsciously said the dragon demon hurriedly.
You don't have to come out, these sundries are given to Yi. On the back of the divine eagle, Yi Tianling in black stands in the wind, and his eyes are like electricity, looking at the square-inch spiritual friar who was attacking the field. Yi Tian. You finally dare to show up.
Do you think you are the original Dante? In the crowd outside the field, a monk shouted excitedly when he saw Yi Tian appear.
He took off a flying sword in his hand and drew a swordlight to shoot at Yi Tian in a flash. Yi Tianling snorted and gestured. The fierce soldier's flying sword appeared out of thin air, as if there was no trace. He cut the flying sword in half, and then the flying sword suddenly turned around, and the cold light flashed into the monk's dantian. With a bang, the fierce soldier's flying sword flew by, but the friar coaxed it to explode, turning into countless pieces of meat flying everywhere, a piece of red. Palace Master. Palace Master. The palace leader is back. In the field, many disciples of the Maitreya palace jumped and cheered. As soon as Yi Tianjia appeared, his hand was like a tonic, which made these disciples on the verge of extinction boil at once. I'm afraid all the monks present, including the dragon demon and the monks in the temple, can't kill a strong person in Yuanying territory with one sword. There was a lot of cheering in the field, but outside the field, many figures shooting at Yi Tianfei suddenly stopped halfway, and their faces showed shock, looking a little timid. Killing the friars of Yuanying territory with one sword really shocked them. They haven't seen such a situation, but most of the monks who can achieve this level are the monks in the realm of God, while Yi Tian in front of them clearly only has the cultivation achievements in the later stage of the realm of golden elixir. No, a year ago, Yi Tian was just a cultivation in the early stage of Longmen territory. Why did he break through to the later stage of Jindan territory in more than a year? Isn't this speed too scary? As soon as one of the friars read this, he took out a bead-shaped sound transmission magic instrument. As soon as the magic power urged, the bead immediately flashed a light. Lao Zhu, on the Earth Star, Yi Tian of the Maitreya Palace has just appeared. Now, in the later cultivation of Jindan territory, he killed the later disciples of Yuanying territory in Dongzhen ruins with a sword. Lao Zhu, what should we do? The man said in a trembling voice. Because he found that since he took out the sound transmission tool, Yi Tian was looking at himself as if he could kill people. The monk had just finished speaking, but his whole body burst open without warning in a huge noise, and Yuanying burst to pieces. The only thing intact in the whole body is the sound-transmitting ball in his hand. When the man just burst open, the ball suddenly flashed to Yi Tian for no reason. While Yuanju was still in the air, an old voice came from the opposite side. It's worthy of being the Dante of that year. It's amazing that he can enter the later stage of the golden elixir in such a short time. As expected, he can't stay. If you want to kill this person at all costs, at least try all his cards. Before the words were finished, the sound transmission ball had fallen into Yi Tian's hands. Yi Tian held the sound transmission magic instrument in his hand and let the voice inside say, with a kind of banter-like smile on his lips. Li Dachuan, what was the sound just now, said here, and the other voice asked. Yi Tian said, Xing'anzi, let Yi tell you. It was Li Dachuan's explosion just now. How's it? Isn't it fun? You've cleaned up. One day, Yi will explode you. Yes, Yi Tian, you are much more arrogant than before. However, you are no longer the original Dan Emperor, and you have no accomplishments in Yupu territory. A little monk in Jindan territory actually talks wildly. Come on, see who explodes who, and I won't give you a chance to grow up. Then wait and see. After listening to the voice of Xing'anzi, the father of the Holy Land, Yi Tian sneered, crushed the ball in his hand, and then looked at many spiritual friars in the distance. Some of them also took out their sound transmission tools and said something quietly. Yi Tian didn't hurry until he waited for a moment. He said in a deep voice, Are you finished reporting? It's time to die. Hearing what Yi Tian said, the 200 or 300 monks in Yuanying immediately looked a little nervous and gathered together to prepare for a group fight. At this time, a friar suddenly screamed. Somehow, the man had turned into two pieces, and the blood splashed. Even the detached Yuanying turned into a piece of meat in an instant. They didn't understand what was going on. Then, the second, third and fourth one by one, the disciples of the square-inch spirit realm died inexplicably one by one. No, an invisible monk attacked. At this time, some people in the crowd suddenly drank, and then the figure flashed. They no longer cared about killing Yi Tian, so they took the escape speed to the extreme and ran away in different directions. Long Daoyu, open the door and chase.
Seeing such a reversal of the situation, Lin's blood surged in his heart and quickly said to the dragon demon. Just before the dragon demon made an action, he was stunned to find that there were suddenly figures around Tian on the back of the divine eagle, all of them chasing after the flying monks in the spirit domain. There are 200 or 300 of those figures. The slowest ones, such as the fastest ones in the spirit domain, are much faster. After releasing a few puppets in Yuanyingjing, Tian no longer cares about the development of the war, because the outcome is doomed. His mind moved. The wings of the golden eye eagle tilted, dived down and fell under the flying peak. God! Master Yi! Senior Dante! The old dragon rushed out first and hugged Tian heavily. The temple disciples behind him saluted Tian respectfully. If we say that in the past, the help to the Maitreya palace came from the command of the Lord of the Temple, but now, their fear of Tian comes from their heart. Dante. Even though he has gone through a journey against time and practiced from scratch, it is enough to make people shudder. Lao Long, it's hard for you. Tian patted Lao Long on the back and said. These 2 times made the dragon demon tremble in his heart. He suddenly remembered that when Tian was still a cultivation in the cave, he punched himself all over the sky. Originally, he thought he had entered Yuanying territory and should be better than Tian, but seeing the scene just now, Lao Long knew that even if there were 300 himself, he was definitely not Tian's opponent. Their breakthrough speed is absolutely against the sky, but the gap between them and Tian is getting bigger and bigger. However, the more so, the more delighted Lao Long is. The more powerful Tian is, the greater his achievements will be in the future. It can't be said that he can recover to the 6th level, or even break through the 7th level. Tiansong opened the old dragon and looked at Linzhua and others. He hugged his fist and said, "Thank all Taoist friends of the temple for helping the Maitreya palace. Yi owes the temple and all Taoist friends a favor. The elder Dante is very serious. We have come to help at the order of the Hall Lord and dare not take credit for it. Even if the Hall Lord doesn't speak, if it's right, we won't stand idly by. What's more, the reputation of the Emperor Dante is powerful. We have looked up to him infinitely. We are lucky to have a good relationship with the elder Dante." Linzhua quickly bowed down and said. Yi Mao wrote down this feeling. Yi Mao has always been clear about kindness and resentment. Naturally, he won't let you contribute in vain. Tian nodded slightly. At this time, he didn't hide the rebirth of the Dan Emperor anymore, because the square-inch spirit domain has been widely spread, and the people in the temple should all know it. Hearing Tian say this, Linzhua was very happy. It was absolutely awesome for Dan D to admit that he owed a favor. You should know that Dan D's attainments in alchemy are the highest in the spiritual realm. Even after his rebirth, I heard that the Dan Emperor's alchemy was more advanced than that in the inch spirit domain. In that year, many people wanted to ask Tian to refine Dan, but because Tian was busy, they couldn't get in. And this feeling is enough to exchange Tian's shot once. Thinking so, Linzhua glanced at the same excited fellow disciples around him and said to Tian again, "Elder Dante, this time, the Earth Star came to support the Maitreya Palace. The Hall Lord also arranged another task to find the missing Dante and the little Hall Lord." "Oh, Ear." Tian heard it. He was gently asking about Ear's whereabouts. He smiled and gestured. In a twinkling, a mini tower appeared in his palm, was thrown at him, fell steadily to the ground and zoomed in quickly. With a mana hitting the tower gate, the prohibition of the spacetime tower is closed. "Come out, you're home," Tian said when he saw that Qin Luo and Ear didn't come out. "Oh. I'm really home." After a pause, a sharp scream came out of time and space, and then with the fragrant wind, Ear rushed out first. Behind her is the Qin Luo god who came out of Shuran. See the little Hall Lord. Seeing Ear, Linzhua looked happy and took the rest of his classmates to salute Ear. "Who are you?" Ear looked at them and didn't know anyone. She turned and hugged Tian's arm. Linzhua and others were stunned, looked at each other with a bitter smile, and said to Ear again, "Little Hall Lord, we are all temple disciples sent by the Hall Lord. Didn't my mother scold me?" Ear knew very few temple disciples. She didn't have much contact with ordinary disciples at ordinary times. At this time, she remembered that she was the little hall lord of the temple and thought of her mother who was strict and kind at ordinary times, so she asked casually. Lin Zhua and others were stunned again. The little hall lord really didn't play cards according to the routine. While talking on both sides, many disciples of the Maitreya palace swarmed out of the field and surrounded them. Chu Shangyun, the 8 elders of the wasteland, Zhou Chengchun, Meng Fong, Lu Ben, Wen Chang, Lin Wuwei, Dai Yu and others came forward to the ceremony with joy, and the scene became lively. Only those disciples who have a high status in the Maitreya palace can come forward. As for some ordinary disciples, they can only watch from a distance. Some disciples even see the legendary palace leader for the first time because they started late. On the other hand, Igan Temple disciples such as Morong Yan and Su Xiao, who had been brought by Yi Tian from Fengsuan spirit domain, also crowded over, greeted Yi Tian and came to Yi's side, chattering. Qin Luoshan also saw the people of the Qin family in the crowd, so he went to talk, cried, and laughed one after another, and there was chaos everywhere.
Well, old dragon, you can withdraw from the field.
Yi Tian exchanged greetings with the people and said to Old Dragon. At this time, the 200 or 300 Wuhuan puppets he sent have returned one after another. Except for a few who killed their opponents, most Wuhuan puppets beat up the monks in the spirit domain and then captured them alive. Many martial spirit puppets, with captured monks in their hands, suspended in the low sky and stood there quietly. The scene was spectacular.
Abandon all cultivation and put them in prison. Yi Tian glanced at those people and said coldly. Poof. Poof. There was a sound.
The puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory clapped their iron palms on the elixir dantian of those square-inch spiritual friars.
Their powerful mana penetrated into the body, smashed Yuanying, and broke the dantian.
As soon as the monks' mana was released, a look of pain appeared on their faces. No matter what the reaction of these people, Yi Tian flew away in the air, suspended in the low altitude, looked at the many disciples of the Maitreya palace present, and said loudly, Yi Tian, come back today and sit in the Maitreya palace.
All the strong enemies come and go.
Such domineering words made the disciples of the Maitreya palace more energetic, and they began to shout. The voice was higher and higher for a long time.
Until Yi Tian pressed his hands, the disciples stopped. He looked at the crowd below and called, Meng Fong, these monks in the square-inch spirit domain are under the custody of the punishment hall and go to prison. Meng Fong, the lord of the punishment hall, promised, waved his hand, ran over with the disciples of the punishment hall, and took the captured friars from the hands of the martial spirit puppet. Including Meng Fong, they were very curious about these martial spirit puppets and couldn't help looking more. Although their realm was low, real people and dummies could still be seen. Fong Zhong. Yi Tian called again. Palace Master. Hearing Yi Tian's call, Fong Zhong immediately stepped forward and bowed to salute.
The Internal Affairs Hall cleared a site 30 li long and 30 li wide on the west side of Feilai Peak.
It doesn't need to be too elaborate. It just needs to relocate the original building and relocate it. Yi Tian ordered. Yes. Fong Zhong promised and left quickly with the disciples of the Internal Affairs Hall. He knew that Yi Tian would make a big move when he came back.
He dared not neglect it at all. Fortunately, these lands had already been bought by the Qin family, and there was no problem how to use them.
Shi Yun. Yi Tian called again.
Shi Yun, who was in charge of the Foreign Affairs Hall, immediately stepped out of the line.
Yi Tian took out a jade slip and quickly depicted it. Then he motioned, and the jade slip flew smoothly to Qi Yun. Create an identity token as listed in the jade slips and proceed as soon as possible. Yes. Qi Yun bowed to answer.
As he stepped back, he pasted the jade slips on his forehead. When he saw the information inside, he couldn't help trembling, and then tried to control himself without being too rude. All kinds of identity tokens written in the jade slips, from the chief of the branch, to the elders, and the first law enforcement envoy to the disciples of different categories. The total number is almost more than 100,000.
What does such a large number mean? Qi Yun has been afraid to think about it.
Lao Long, the other 6 halls and 12 halls, the lord of the hall, enter the hall for discussion.
Yi Tian then released a magic weapon cave, fell on the ground and said.
With that, he took the lead in entering the magic weapon cave. On the other side, Ear was still in Murangian. A group of former colleagues were chattering. On the contrary, Lin Zuat and his gang were cold by her, and Yi Tian didn't pay attention to them anymore. The party followed Yi Tian into the cave and sat on the ground. Yi Tian sat in a master's chair and looked at the crowd. He saw some people for the first time. Chu Shangyun, the current Maitreya Palace elder of the original monk sect, introduced Yi Tian. Some of them were monks who later joined the Maitreya Palace. Because of their outstanding points, Chu Shangyun was appointed to supervise the affairs of a certain hall. After some introduction, Yi Tian knew all the main characters in the old part of the Maitreya Palace. All of you are the backbone of the Maitreya Palace. During the period when the master left the Maitreya Palace, you can perform your duties and support the Maitreya Palace to the present. When the Maitreya Palace is in danger, you can unite against foreign enemies. The master is very comforted. Now the master specially rewards each child with 100,000 fairy jade, 5 pills for auxiliary cultivation, 1 magic weapon for half-immortal soldiers and 1 magic weapon for flying, a black dragon armor, said Yi Tian after Chu Xiangyu's introduction. Thank you for your kindness. Hearing the speech, all the people present couldn't help shaking their spirits, and their faces showed a look of ecstasy. 100,000 fairy jade is definitely an astronomical number for them, and the magic weapon of half-fairy soldiers is a legendary artifact. Pill is the most important supplement to cultivation and is their dream cultivation resource. Although they have never seen the flying magic weapon and the black dragon armor, they can be rewarded together with the magic weapon of 100,000 immortal jade and half-immortal soldiers. Needless to say, they are certainly not ordinary products. Yi Tian continued, these things will be distributed after the meeting. Next, Elder Chu will introduce the current situation of the Maitreya Palace and the situation outside. Chu Xiangyu sorted out his ideas a little and began to introduce them. So far, there are more than 8,000 disciples in the Maitreya Palace, including overseas Sangxianshan and Lingchong friars. They have all moved to the Maitreya Palace. Due to the short time to enter the Maitreya Palace, the vast majority of disciples still stay in the cave for cultivation. Individual monks enter the sea viewing area from the cave through the pill given by Yi Tian before. There are no more than 10 people, including Chu Shangyun. All of them are the heads of the 6 halls and 10 halls. Because most of the disciples have a low level, they mainly carry out daily cultivation. When fighting against the friars in Fengsuan spirit domain, they are dominated by the dragon demon with the highest cultivation. Therefore, the disciples in the Maitreya Palace have no damage. However, being suppressed in the field of the Maitreya Palace and not daring to fight is indeed a very shameless thing. Yi Tian nodded as he listened. He also had a general understanding of the situation of the Maitreya Palace. It's nothing to lose face. He has no strength. It's not advisable to go out and die for nothing. Well, you have done a good job in saving the lives of the disciples of the Maitreya Palace. The leader of the palace will get back the face lost before. After Chu Shangyun introduced the internal situation of the Maitreya Palace, Yi Tian said, talk about the situation outside. Chu Shangyun continued, the palace has always maintained frequent contact with the military and knows a lot about the situation outside. The black clouds over the Devil's Cave in northern Xinjiang spread in all directions at the speed of 20 or 30 miles a day, and all the places passed, whether mountains, rivers, cities and villages, were swallowed up in the black fog. Moreover, according to the military investigation, there are countless monsters in the black fog. Occasionally, monsters leave the black fog to harm the people and cause great panic among the people. Since half a year ago, the people in Mabe have been forced to move south, resulting in great losses. The loss of property is the second, but now the problem is that we can't stop the spread of black fog. Although China has a vast territory, under the expansion of black fog, not only China, but even the whole earth is likely to be swallowed up by black fog. The military used various means to attack the monsters in the black fog. The artillery bombarded for a long time, and even used some weapons of mass destruction. The bombing targets were mainly the original uninhabited areas. For example, the original places where people lived in cities and villages were avoided. The military also thought that one day when the black fog dispersed, the people could move back to their former home's garden. but in my opinion, this idea is quite idealized.
We don't know how much damage the military's attack has caused to the monsters in the Black Fog.
However, the monsters in the Black Fog don't seem to have decreased, and a large number of monsters have been sent out several times to attack the military base.
Their attacks are basically unstoppable.
Because the Black Fog is expanding all the time every day, many people have moved south many times, that is, they have just moved to a place and haven't had time to catch their breath. They immediately received a notice and continued to move. Due to the lack of transportation capacity, many people have no time to take away much of their property. Many people are hard to leave their hometown and need to do a lot of work to make sense.
When they leave, they delay the time of migration.
Not long ago, I received a phone call from the military saying that the Black Fog has flooded more than a dozen big cities such as Mabe City, Chunshan City, and Hongfeng City.
Due to railway transportation and road transportation capacity is limited.
Some people who have no time to move south by car have to withdraw from these cities on foot, otherwise they will be buried in the Black Fog.
But the speed of walking is very slow.
Many people carry heavy loads for food and clothing along the way, so that they can't go up. If they go on at this speed, they are likely to be caught up by the Black Fog and lose their lives.
Think about it. How many people need to move in the land of more than 100,000 square kilometers in the north? I'm really busy.
When I received the phone, our Miluo palace was being attacked by monks in the spirit domain.
How can I spare any strength to support the military?
Even if I have spare strength, I can't deal with the monsters in the fog.
Who is the commander-in-chief of the military against the dark fog?
Yi Tian interrupted Chu Shangyun and asked.
It's the highest military headquarters. The person who called me was General Yuan Yi.
He was in charge of one of the war zones and the defense around the northern desert city.
Chu Shangyun immediately replied. Yi Tian nodded slightly and said, "Connect General Yuan Yi immediately."
Chu Shangyun took out the phone from his pocket, pressed several numbers and sent it to Yi Tian.
The phone was connected.
Before we heard General Yuan Yi's voice, there had been deafening gunfire. "Hello, Mr. Chu, how's your side?" Then, General Yuan Yi's low voice came from the rumbling gunfire.
Yi Tian shouted, "General Yuan, I'm Yi Tian.
The danger of the Maitreya Palace has been lifted.
Wipe out the invading enemy." "Ah, it's Lord Yi. You're finally back."
General Yuan Yi's surprised voice came from the microphone. "Lord Yi's situation is urgent.
A large number of evacuees need protection. Can you lead the Sacred Wind Army to cover it?"
"It's very urgent."
"Okay, General Yuan, get there in a minute."
"Don't worry,"
Yi Tian said and stood up.
He said to Chu Shangyun, "I'll take this phone first.
I'll contact you whenever I have something to do." "Palace leader, how many people do you need to bring?"
"I'll gather the disciples right away."
Chu Shangyun also stood up and asked.
"If you don't take one, you can keep the Maitreya Palace,"
Yi Tian said, and quickly walked out of the magic weapon cave.
His mind moved. The golden eye statue in the sky swooped down.
Yi Tian's body flew to the golden eye statue.
The next moment, the statue had disappeared in the sky.
The divine eagle went all the way north. Sure enough, it came to the boundless dark fog in less than a minute.
There were only a lot of vehicle-mounted cannons, firing fire and slowly moving south. The roaring artillery fire was deafening and smoke filled the air, as if it were a large scene on the battlefield.
The golden eye god carved a meal. Yi Tian read his hair one by one.
More than 10 heart-connecting insects flew out of the spirit beast ring and flew towards the boundless dark fog. He was swept away, fell from the golden eye statue and fell to a slowly moving command car. "General Yuan, I'm coming." When he saw the field on the command car, his eyes were red.
He was obviously thin and old. Yi Tian felt a little uncomfortable. He could see that the veteran army had worked hard and suffered a lot.
"Lord Yi, you're here at last." Seeing Yi Tian, Yuan Yi jumped down from the command car excitedly. With a pair of powerful big hands, he held Yi Tian's hands tightly.
Then he looked around and asked, "Are the others behind?"
"No, all my people carry them with them."
They are among the treasures called Magic Weapon Cave.
General Yuan, please stop the shelling.
There are no monsters within the range of the cannon.
Yi Tian glanced at the picture sent back by the heartbug in his mind and said,
Are you sure? Yuan Yi looked at the dark fog and asked.
He is an ordinary person, and some scientific instruments can't penetrate the thick black fog, and infrared imaging technology doesn't work, because those Mingxiu are not living people. Therefore, shooting into the dark fog is a blind blow by virtue of luck.
I'm sure. Please give orders. All troops can withdraw. Leave the rest to me. Yi Tian nodded and confirmed.
No, it's impossible to withdraw. We have to be responsible for people's lives and property. Since Lord Yi confirmed that there were no monsters within the range of the artillery, we pulled the artillery farther away and were ready to deal with monsters that might come.
Yuan Yi said decisively.
Lord Yi, please help us and protect the retreating people together.
No problem, General Yuan.
It's urgent for the party to protect the people, but the best way is to fundamentally curb the spread of black fog.
Yi Tian nodded. We don't know this truth, but we can't stop it. Yuan Yi shook his head helplessly. Leave it to me. I'll find a way.
Yi Tian said, gesturing and releasing a magic weapon cave. Morong Chanshan, Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru came out.
Master. Is this the ancestral star? Morong Chanshan asked with a frown, sensing the surrounding environment. Yi Tian nodded slightly and said, Yes, we have come to the ancestral star.
At present, the invasion of the underworld has formed a scale.
It's time for us to defend the ancestral star. Old 17, lead the disciples of Shueiyue branch to guard at the edge of the dark fog.
If there is a dark monk who dares to break out of the dark fog, he must resist it to ensure the safety of people's lives.
Yes, Master. Morong Chanshan said solemnly.
This is General Yuan of the military. He is an old general with high moral integrity and high prestige. It is more important to ensure the safety of the old general and other soldiers.
Yi Tian pointed to Yuan Yi. Yes, Master. Morong Chanshan readily agreed. He was already moving.
Then he released the magic weapon cave and called out the 13 elders. 13 elders released their caves again, and many disciples of Shueiyue sect came out.
This scene stunned Yuan Yi and other soldiers present. Isn't this too mysterious?
Then, the next moment, something more mysterious and illusory happened. Yi Tian pointed to a place, and a small dish appeared out of thin air. Then it quickly enlarged, turned into 4 or 5 feet in size, and suspended in the low sky.
UFO! Someone exclaimed.
Others didn't think so, but Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru were slightly stunned.
It was obvious that Master took it out for the first time. But those people spoke out the name of Master. What the hell is going on?
The two men were puzzled.
Yi Tian put away his magic weapon and said hello to Yuan Yi. Then he took Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru to the UFO. With the opening of the shield, the flying saucer paused in place, suddenly flew into the dark fog and disappeared in everyone's view. The technological level of monks is far better than that of ordinary people. Yuan Yi sighed before he could digest the magical scenes he saw. Suddenly, he had some confidence in Yi. The flying saucer was walking through the dark fog.
After flying for about 100 miles, I had seen some shadows of the white bone Mingxiu. Those white bone skeletons rushed towards the flying saucer. Yi Tianxue didn't change her flight direction and flew straight north. All Mingxiu who dared to stop them directly hit the past. Everywhere she passed, there were white bones flying.
These are Mingxiu?
They look very weak. Liao Tungwen said, looking at the scene outside the UFO.
Yi Tian smiled and said, Old 16, don't underestimate the enemy.
In the two savage spiritual realm, the overall strength of the nether cultivation is to crush the human friars. The nether cultivation you see is only the lowest existence in the nether cultivation, which is the nether soldier and nether general, but the cave and sea viewing environment equivalent to the human friars. The most powerful nether cultivation you have ever seen is the cultivation of the celestial palace of the human friars and wants to kill you. It doesn't take much effort for such a spiritual friar.
So powerful?
To tell you the truth, I've never seen a strong man in Heaven Palace.
Liao Tungwen said in surprise.
He, you are not as good as me, senior brother 16, Situ Juanru interposed at this time.
Old 17, have you met?
Liao Tungwen asked after seeing Situ Juanru. That's not true, but before you, Shifu has introduced me to the strong in Tiangong. The strong in Yupu is a great friar, while the strong in Tiangong is powerful, which is by no means comparable to the great friar in Yupu, Situ Juanru said with some complacency.
Then I hope I don't encounter such a powerful Ming Xiu.
Liao Tungwen heard the speech, ignored the quarrel with Situ Juanru, and looked nervously out of the flying saucer. Now the real strength of the underworld is a blind spot for us.
We don't know anything so far, so we should be careful and don't underestimate the enemy.
Yi Tian said somewhat but surely, looking at more and more underworld practitioners outside the UFO. Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru nodded at the same time. They also saw that the white bone Mingxiu became more and more dense in their field of vision.
With the rapid flight of flying saucers, they seemed to break into the army of white bone Mingxiu.
Looking around, as long as they could see, there were Mingxiu everywhere.
God! How many skeletons are there? 100 million? 1 billion? Liao Tungwen was stunned when he saw this. Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru were stunned by the number of white skeletons in the dark fog. Even Yi Tianxian became more and more dignified.
He is not afraid of so many netherworld practices. He has many cards and means to deal with them, but if all these netherworld practices break out of the netherworld fog, it will be a huge disaster for the whole earth. Because their own manpower is absolutely insufficient to stop so many nether practices. Even if they stand still one by one, it takes a lot of time to kill them. Moreover, the most important thing is that this is the meditation we see at present. The dark fog covers an area of more than 100,000 square kilometers. How many dark repairs should there be in such a large area? Fortunately, the meditation in the dark fog should sit and wait for the dark fog to cover the earth without taking the initiative to go out. Look, Mingxiu is attacking with magic weapons.
Liao Tungwen suddenly shouted.
Almost at the same time, many white bone guns and bone swords turned into a white light and burst at the flying saucer.
Boom, boom.
The flying saucer suddenly collided with those violent bone guns and bone swords, making a loud roar.
Although the flying saucer was intact, it also produced a not too strong vibration. This attack should be made by the Emperor of the Underworld. It can also be said to be a magic weapon.
It is a magic weapon made of white bones unique to the monk of the Underworld. At least the realm of the Emperor of the Underworld can make this attack, which is equivalent to the Yuaning realm cultivation of the Terran monk.
Yi Tian began to briefly introduce Mingxiu. He took Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru on a flying saucer.
His original intention was to let them know about Mingxiu, because these people had never dealt with this strange Mingxiu, and most of them had dealt with those monsters in the holy demon realm.
I see.
I don't know if I can see the nether god in the nether cultivation above nether zone here. After listening to Yi Tian's brief introduction, Situ Juanru nodded slightly and his face became more dignified. The strength of nether cultivation has exceeded his previous imagination.
As you wish, you see, those white lights are at least the nether cultivation above the nether god.
Just after Situ Juanru finished, Yi Tian pointed to the distance and saw several white shadows flash in front of the flying saucer. The white shadows were extremely tall and the bones in their hands were tens of feet long. They cut down against the flying saucer. With a bang, the flying saucer collided with the bone and shook violently. Then it rushed over and left the white light behind. Yes, the UFO's defense ability is very good. It can carry their attack hard.
Yi Tian nodded approvingly.
He also intended to try the UFO's defense ability, otherwise he can avoid the other party's attack by just manipulating the UFO. Situ Juanru turned his head to look behind him, looked at the white shadows that disappeared in his sight, and said, "It's really fierce. It can attack flying saucers to this extent.
Ming Xiuzhen can't be underestimated.
Boom! The flying saucer flew all the way and encountered many attacks along the way, but Yi Tian ignored it. He won't entangle with each other at this time, because the dark fog is spreading all the time. Now the first task is to stop the spread of the dark fog. The deeper he went into the dark fog, the more frightened Yi Tian was. There were so many nether practices in the dark fog that he wondered if the whole nether world had come here. Of course, it will not be determined, but one thing is certain. With the continuous diffusion of the dark fog, more and more nether practitioners will come to the Earth star. After all, when the nether fog is only half of the current area, there will never be so many nether practices. Yi Tian went deep into the dark fog twice a year and didn't see so many dark practices. Golden meditation. At this time, Liao Tungwen suddenly shouted. There's also a golden bone Mingxiu here. Seeing the huge golden skeleton 4 or 5 feet high ahead, Yi Tian couldn't help but be stunned. In addition to seeing the golden bone Mingxiu in the time and spirit domain, there has never been such a color Mingxiu in the great wilderness spirit domain. This is at least a meditation in the realm of Mingzun. Seeing the speed of the golden bone repair, Yi Tian said in a heavy voice. Up to now, it can be determined that there must be a spiritual practice higher than the realm of transforming God in the underworld, which is really not good news. With that, he hit the UFO with his magic power. The UFO flew to the side of the direction and flew towards the tall golden skeleton. Master, I'm not sure that this flying saucer can withstand the blow of Mingzun, Situjuanru said hurriedly with a change in his face. Old 17, you think too much. I didn't want to be beaten in the past. Yi Tian smiled softly and then said, Shenrun, take down this golden skeleton. Yes, Palace Master. The UFO suddenly remembered Shenrun's voice. Liao Tungwen and Situjuanru were stunned. At this time, they knew that Shenrun was also in the UFO. They know that Shenrun is good at invisibility and habitually invisibility, but this living person is close at hand, but they can't feel it at all. Isn't this magical power too terrible? Before they could think more, Yi Tian suddenly lit up a faint light, and then saw a white light in the dark fog ahead, and a large white net covered the huge gold skeleton flying quickly. As soon as the golden skeleton was tied by the Tian Luo net, a gray shadow quickly flew out of the golden skeleton and fled to the distance. At this time, a terrible thunder suddenly fell from the sky and accurately split on the soul of the golden skeleton. With a shrill scream, the soul turned into wisps of smoke and disappeared invisible. In the twinkling of an eye, Shenrun, who was invisible, collected the gold skeleton into Shumi ring, directly penetrated the defense shield and flew back to the flying saucer. So simple? Liao Tungwen and Situjuanru were stunned. Mingzuan was as simple as a great monk in the human Yupu territory, and was killed. Think about it. In the holy demon realm, neither the Tiger King nor the double-headed Zhao King was killed by Shenrun, too? Shenrun still didn't show up. The UFO was quiet, and the hard UFO continued to collide and fly north all the way. Master, it seems that you are familiar with here and have been inside. Finally, Liao Tungwen couldn't help asking. Yes, I did come here, and more than once. More than a year ago, I entered the dark fog when I was cultivating in the sea viewing realm. Yi Tian nodded. A year ago? Viewing the sea? Liao Tungwen and Situjuanru looked at each other and were stunned. Even if there were twice as many magic weapons in the cave, they had to cross many spiritual regions in more than a year. There must be a lot of time for cultivation. How could they cross from the viewing the sea to the golden elixir? Well, Shifu, the disciple ventured to ask, how much time has Shifu spent practicing from the beginning to now? Situjuanru asked tentatively. Yi Tian sighed with emotion. Time is like running water, like a white horse passing through a gap, in a flash. I have been practicing for nearly 3 years as a teacher. Poof. Somewhere in the void, Shenrun almost choked with saliva, while Liao Tungwen and Situjuanru almost both spewed out a mouthful of old blood. 3 years, to the later stage of the golden elixir realm? If Yi Tian didn't say it himself, they couldn't believe it. Who believes it? This is the speed that absolutely can't exist. Flying saucers are out of reach. I know you have many questions in your mind, and I'm afraid Shenrun's questions will be more. At that time, you heard the dialogue between Friar Fong Cun and me.
Well, now I have a showdown.
In fact, I'm not an ordinary friar. In my previous life, I was the master of the green and dark blessed land in Fong Cun's spiritual domain, once a great friar of Yupu territory and a generation of Dan Emperor in the spiritual domain. Because I turn with memory when the world is reborn, the enemies of the past always want to be a teacher to death, so they don't hesitate to come to the Earth Star and look for a teacher.
Yi Tian said slowly. Ah.
Liao Tongwen and Situjuanru were stunned, and many of their doubts were immediately solved by people.
No wonder. No wonder. The master has everything in his mind. Is this the reason?
The old slave did have some doubts when he heard the dialogue between you. He had some guesses, but it was incredible. Xian Runyi was excited, showed his body and said. After calming his mind a little and digesting the whole shocking news, Situjuanru asked softly, Master, disciple is ignorant. I've only heard of six samsara and reincarnation before, but it's the first time I've heard of reincarnation with memory.
It was your teacher, Emperor Sui, who chose to be a teacher.
He said that only being a teacher can save all living things and rob all heaven and all regions. Therefore, by using extraordinary means, you can have the reincarnation and rebirth of a teacher.
Everything is not the original intention of a teacher, but the important task is on your shoulder. A teacher has retired and can't retreat. Yi Tian sighed helplessly.
It turns out that Shifu was the important task of saving the world and transforming the disasters of all heaven and all regions. It's really lucky for us to follow Shifu. Situjuanru didn't think that Yi Tian was full of nonsense. He couldn't help but look stifled and said leisurely. Master, the old slave is superficial. I'm afraid the master would keep it from us if he didn't hear the conversation between you by chance. Xian Run breathed out a deep breath and said respectfully.
Yi Tian nodded slightly. I'm worried that you will be overburdened.
In the future, you will save all the people in the world and resolve the robbery of all heaven and all regions. Since I'm talking about this topic, I'd like to tell you that all the so-called heaven and all regions belong to the spiritual world, and above the spiritual world is the fairy world. Once you become an immortal, you can never die, and you will have this kind of immortality if you follow me as a teacher. Yes.
Master. I'm very lucky.
Situjuanru and Liao Tong were shocked by their tattoos and said with surprise. At this time, they were very lucky to follow Yi Tian here. The old 18, who is also a disciple of Master, may not have such a chance. It's good to be dominant in the holy demon realm, but it's good after all. But compared with immortality, those are floating clouds. Xianrun, you also have this opportunity. Seeing Xianrun's silence, Yi Tian smiled and said.
Thank you, Master. How can the old slave get such a favor? It's really frightening.
Xianrun was overjoyed and hurried to say. Well, Master, take me in and practice as a person. You'll try your best. It's almost time to go to the entrance of the underworld. Yi Tian said and began to pay attention to the situation outside. Since the golden skeleton puppet was captured, there were no same golden skeletons. Those white skeletons also tried to avoid the flying saucer, but some unlucky white skeletons were hit and flew because the flying saucer was too fast. How can Shifu stop the fog from spreading? Situjuanru said, looking at the thick fog outside. Of course, it depends on the situation. I didn't go deep into the entrance of the underworld twice before.
I don't know the details there. Yi Tian said in a deep voice.
Liao Tongwen and Situjuanru said no more. They focused on looking out of the UFO. In the dark fog at this time, countless Mingxiu watched nervously in the distance. They looked like they were in a tight array. Although the array was huge, no Mingxiu dared to come and forcibly stop the flying saucer. It seems that they have been afraid of flying saucers, an extremely terrible magic weapon. Old 17, yes, your flying saucer is very successful and has exceeded my expectations. Yi Tian said with satisfaction after feeling the performance of the flying saucer.
Thank you for your praise, Master.
If it weren't for the Master's provision of a large number of top-grade fairy jade, the disciple wouldn't try to make 16 flying saucers driven by fairy jade. After all, the number of top-grade fairy jade was really limited in Tiangong's sect, Situjuanru said with a bitter smile. Yi Tian nodded slightly, no longer talking about it, but looked at several peaks looming in the fog. In his impression, he has seen these peaks. Because of the great spread of the dark fog, the areas he crossed before were originally outside the dark fog when he left the earth. Yi Tian pays attention to these areas entirely because the peaks in these areas are basically consistent with the terrain depicted in the map on the gold foil he obtained. What he wants to look for is the entrance of the underworld. He believes that such a large amount of underworld chi must rush into the Earth star from the entrance of the underworld. Only then did the dark chi spread rapidly on the Earth star, covering and occupying the homes inhabited by human beings for generations. While observing the terrain outside, Yi Tian carefully recalled the gold foil maps he had obtained. Then he controlled the UFO and quickly approached one of the peaks. The flying saucer has just changed here. In the distance, many Ningxiu seem to be very nervous. They quickly gather together and form a white skeleton wall to block the progress of the flying saucer. Sure enough, it's here. Yi Tian said with bright eyes. This situation shows that Ningxiu's tight defense is precisely because this is likely to be the entrance to the underworld. Master, those meditation practitioners should have put all their eggs in one basket. Liao Tungwen shook the Banxian soldier's flying sword and said. Old 16, you guessed right. The entrance of the underworld should be in front. A lot of dark chi should come out from there. Although we can't see it yet. As long as we get close, we will find the truth of the entrance. Yi Tian said with a frozen look, come on, old 17 is ready to release your martial spirit puppet and kill it directly. As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured, and the mini mountain and river seal appeared in his hand, and then a mana hit the UFO. The defense shield of the flying saucer was closed instantly, and Yi Tian gestured. The mountain and river seal instantly magnified into a size of 40 or 50 mu, enveloping the surrounding space. Many nearby meditations are instantly affected by the gravity field. They can't move as if they were frozen in the air. Looking at the scene, Yi Tian waved to Liao Tungwen and Situjuanru and said, Old 16, Old 17, it's time for you to start. Liao Tungwen and Situjuanru flashed and flew out of the flying saucer. They shot cold ons in their hands. Where the cold on came, a white bone was flying. This is a massacre. Like all previous massacres, many meditation practitioners have no power to fight back. Shanhian once again shows its powerful rolling force. Within a radius of 40 or 50 mu, all the meditation practices are like lambs to be slaughtered. They can't move, fight back, attack, or even escape. Under the terrorist attacks of Liao Tungwen and Situjuanru, they turned into pieces of flying and scattered everywhere. Even Yi Tian didn't take a shot, and the surroundings were quickly emptied. Countless netherworld practitioners in the distance saw this scene withdraw like a tide, and there was a vacuum around. Looking at the Ming Xiu who was retreating like the tide, Yi Tianling snorted. The Ming Xiu here seems to be smarter than the Ming Xiu in the time and spirit domain. They don't just rush forward and know how to advance and retreat. Since Ming Xiu doesn't attack anymore, Yi Tian doesn't bother to pay attention to them in order to save time. He drove the UFO to fly forward slowly. Where Shanhian went, Ming Xiu still retreated like a tide and didn't dare to get close to Shanhian at all. Yi Tian opened his mind and carefully observed the surrounding situation. Although his mind was greatly suppressed, Yi Tian is far from being comparable to the previous Yi Tian. The power of divine thoughts even surpasses the ordinary friars in Yuanying territory. With his continuous in-depth observation, he finally saw a golden bone Mingxiu hidden in the dark fog in the distance. Yi Tian was slightly surprised. It seems that the golden bone Mingxiu in the underworld is not the one captured before. Judging from the height of this golden bone Mingxiu, it should also have the realm of Ming respect, which is equivalent to the existence of the great friar of the Terran Jade Pu realm. But since these practices did not continue to block the UFO's progress, Yi Tian ignored them and continued to explore. Where the UFO went, Mingxiu retreated like a tide, avoided the UFO far, and didn't collide with Yi Tian and others. Yi Tian drives the UFO. While exploring the situation ahead, he carefully looked for the entrance to the underworld. And now, In the two dark sockets of the gold bone puppet in the distance, there are two groups of flickering fireworks. I can't see what expression it is. Nearby, a white bone Mingxiu said to Jean Bone Mingxiu, "Dear ones, let them go like this? In case." Before Bai Bone Mingxiu finished, Jean Bone Mingxiu said in a hoarse voice, "There's nothing in case.
Don't pay attention to it, they will.
There is no need to fight with them unnecessarily and do not cause unnecessary casualties.
Let them go. What else can several Terran friars do in our world? Even if they find the entrance to our underworld, what can it do? They won't have any way without watching the dark fog back to the Earth Star."
White Bone Mingxiu also had two fireworks flashing in his eyes. It seems that his focus has been staring at Yi Tian in the UFO.
At this point, this is what he said to Jingu Mingxiu, "Venerable, this Yi Tian has some abilities.
Our people have suffered great losses under him, so don't take it lightly. Especially his huge magic weapon, it seems that his power is not small and can have the power of fixing the body."
Jin Guming said coldly, "Are you all frightened by this Terran friar? A magic weapon is what can you do with great power? Can you deal with all the Pluto? Sooner or later, you'll find a way to know. He can't take advantage of the presence of the original. However, in order to avoid the edge, you'd better follow my orders and retreat all without stopping. I'll see what he can do." Hearing the speech, Bai Gu Mingxiu sighed, and then reluctantly said, "It's venerable. Yi Tianlu is sensitive."
Although he is far away from them, he still hears the dialogue between Jingu Mingxiu and Bai Gu Mingxiu. He raised his eyebrows slightly, finally said nothing, and continued to drive the UFO forward. Mingxiu retreated like a tide to make room for a lot of space. This situation has continued for a long time. The flying saucer flew forward without obstacles. As the mountains in the distance get closer and closer, Yi Tian compares the gold foil pictures in his mind.
Look from one peak to another.
With the continuous shortening of the distance, sure enough, the dark fog here is much stronger than that in other places.
Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru were also observing the situation around them.
At this time, Liao Tungwen suddenly said, "Master, the disciples found that the meditation here is very dense."
Moreover, they gathered in the distance. They didn't hide. It's likely that the entrance to the underworld is here. Yi Tian nodded slightly and said, "Old 16, your observation is still good.
It's not easy to have this judgment when you enter the dark fog for the first time." Liao Tungwen smiled a few times and said, "The disciple just took the liberty to guess.
He can't be praised by the master."
At this time, Situ Juanru suddenly said, "Master, I finally understand why you bring back a lot of looting embers.
Is it specially prepared for the underworld?"
Yi Tian smiled and said, "You're enlightened at last, but you only guessed one, but you didn't guess the other. It's not only for the underworld, but also for the demon world. But now the payment request of the underworld is more serious, so the underworld should taste the power of robbing embers first. However, whether to use robbing embers now depends on the specific situation." Situ Juanru looked at Yi Tian with admiring eyes. Shifu was far-sighted. He even considered the layout of the underworld and the demon world when he was in the Guanghan spirit region. This vision is by no means comparable to those of us disciples. Apart from robbing embers, the disciples can't think of any way to close the entrance of the underworld and the demon world.
"Old 17, you are not young. Your biggest disadvantage is that you flatter. Master doesn't eat this set."
Yi Tian shook his head slightly and said with a smile, and then turned to the main topic, "Before seeing the size of the entrance to the underworld with your own eyes, you can't determine the specific way to close the entrance to the underworld for the time being. It must be used to rob embers for once and for all, but it can't be easily exposed when it's not necessary, so as to give too much response time to the underworld or the demon world."
The flying saucer slowly slowed down while the master and apprentice spoke.
At this time, the flying saucer has been placed in an increasingly thick fog.
Yi Tianyu looked around.
At this time, the surrounding Mingxiu had completely abandoned his defense and hid far away. Yuan Tian's eyes shone through, and he found that dozens of feet away from the UFO, there was a thick dark fog rising and rolling out, as if there was an invisible thick chimney under the ground, which was particularly eye-catching. "It should be there. Yi Tian murmured, urging the UFO to fly to the rolling fog.
The mountain and river seal outside the UFO is like a god of plague.
Wherever you go, nearby Mingxiu avoid one after another. Without any obstruction, Yi Tian came to the edge of the fog column gushing out of the ground. When he got close, he could clearly see that the thick and thin dark fog had been sprayed from the ground to the high altitude under the powerful impact force, and the invisible airflow generated around him pushed the nearby dark fog to rush and spread out, which was very frightening. Yi Tian glanced casually at the many nether practices that surrounded him in the distance and looked here.
Then he looked at the surging fog for a moment, and a mana hit the UFO.
The stopped UFO began to move slowly again. Push forward slowly along the edge of the dark fog. In distance, Mingxiu was still just watching, and no one dared to come. Before long, Yi Tian's flying saucer had turned around the dark fog gushing underground.
Through observation, he has been able to determine, yes.
As he expected, this is the entrance of the underworld to the Earth star. The place where the dark fog spewed out was a huge and dark cave. The cave is not round, but an irregular shape. It is so big that it has a radius of 20 or 30 mu.
It looks gloomy and terrible, like a monster's mouth soaking in the dark fog.
Such a huge entrance, no wonder the dark fog will spread around at such a terrible speed.
In this moment, I don't know how many dark fog joined the fog sea.
Outside, I don't know how many lands originally belonging to human beings were covered by dark fog and became the boundary of the Ming family. At this time, Yi Tian no longer hesitated. He thought a little.
A mana in his hand hit the mountain and river seal, and the mountain and river seal slowly fell down.
Yi Tian adjusted the angle and steadily printed the mountains and rivers at the entrance of the underworld. Although the speed of the mountain river seal was not fast, it made a loud noise when it landed. The huge power made the earth below tremble slightly. With the terrible power of the mountain river seal, it even pressed the entrance of the massive dark fog into the ground more than 3 or 4 meters deep. Yi Tian calculated the angle at which the mountain and river seal fell very accurately. It was strictly inlaid at the entrance of the underworld, and there was not even a trace of air attack. When the mountain and river ringing fell suddenly, the whole entrance to the underworld was suddenly covered, and the originally rolling dark fog suddenly disappeared out of thin air. No more dark fog gushed out of the entrance to the underworld, and the surrounding dark fog no longer had the previous rolling and surging trend, and seemed much calmer. Venerable, they really closed the entrance to the underworld. The white skeleton in the distance couldn't see anything, but the 2 flames in his white skeleton's eye socket kept flashing in the direction of the mountain and river seal, and a hoarse voice came out between the opening and closing of his jaw. There was a trace of urgency in the voice.
The golden skeleton didn't speak.
After a moment of silence, he slowly said, I really belittled this Terran boy. I didn't expect that he had paid so much money and used such a magic weapon to close the entrance to the underworld.
However, he was only in vain. There is not only one entrance to the underworld. Can he seal one or go crazy with the other 6? But what should we do now? Stop him?
Or let him seal the entrance? The white skeleton asked in an uncertain voice.
You can't let him succeed. Send orders.
Launch a long-range attack immediately. In order to minimize the casualties of the people, there is no need to fight hand-to-hand unless you have to, the golden skeleton said with gnashing teeth.
Yes.
Venerable. The white skeleton promised, turned around and shouted to many white bones behind him, use bone tools to launch long-range attacks.
No one can get close to them.
With his words, countless practitioners gathered around him had enough mana, and the bone knives and guns in their hands flashed white and shot at Yi Tian and Liao Tungwen. But at this time, these white bone Mingxiu didn't appreciate the power of mountain and river seal.
Countless white shadows roared, with huge momentum and terrible attack power.
However, when these bone knives and spears were still some distance away from Shan He seal, they seemed to be suspended in the air and couldn't move forward for half a minute. Let alone kill Yi Tian and Situjuanru, they didn't even have a chance to get close to Shan He seal. Such a strange scene made the golden skeleton silent again. A moment later, he said in a hoarse voice, I didn't expect this magic weapon to be so powerful.
Is it the legendary thing?
What? The white skeleton seemed to know nothing about what the golden skeleton said.
He couldn't help asking in doubt.
Just now he had some illusions and heard a trace of fear from the voice of the golden skeleton Mingxiu. After Yi Tianjin pressed the entrance of the demon world, there was no other change.
He just stood on the magic seal and looked at this side covetously. It didn't seem to launch an attack.
The golden skeleton continued, that happened in a very, very long time, and it didn't happen in the Holy Land, but in a place called Time and Spirit area.
No, it's impossible. How could the ghost's nemesis appear in the Holy Land?
Without waiting for Bai Gu Mingxiu to say anything, Jin Gu Mingxiu suddenly murmured.
Hearing the speech, Bai Gu Mingxiu asked blankly, "What kind of nemesis is the Venerable?"
Jin Gu Mingxiu seemed to shake his head gently, and the fireworks in his eyes kept jumping. Do you know why our Ming nationality has the strength to crush the Holy Land spiritual domain, but has never gone out of the dark fog to conquer the Holy Land spiritual domain on a large scale?
Bai Gu Mingxiu shook his head blankly again.
Jin Gu Mingxiu said hoarsely, "Let me tell you. This matter is related to those things that happened in the Time and Spirit realm a long time ago.
The Ming clan there once swept the whole Time and Spirit realm.
But because they were too overbearing and had no scruples, the friars in the Time and Spirit realm could not resist the steps of the Ming clan, but finally angered some powerful human friars. So, in the end, the whole Ming clan was punished, the cruel repression of foreign powerful friars.
The supreme ruler of the Pluto, the mixed king of the underworld, is not spared.
One of the magic weapons used by the human powerful power is the square big seal used by Yi Tian, named Shanhe seal, which is what our master calls the conqueror of the Pluto. The emperor is not worried about the local friars in the Holy Land spiritual domain, but about the interference of foreign forces. Before the dark fog covers the whole Holy Land spiritual domain, and before the whole Earth star becomes the territory of the underworld, the emperor does not want this situation to happen again here. Therefore, our strategy is stable and conservative. After all, as long as the dark chi covers the whole Holy Land spiritual domain, it will be here, it will always be the territory of the underworld.
So it is.
White Bone Mingxiu couldn't see what kind of expression it was, but the two flames in his eyes kept flashing. He always stared at the direction of Yi Tian and Situjuanru and said, "Although I've never seen the so-called nemesis, Yi Tian's magic weapon is really powerful. I'm afraid there's little that can deal with them except the nether array."
Jin Gu Mingxiu suddenly laughed, "Ha! There's nothing to worry about.
Although this magic weapon is powerful, they foolishly use it to suppress the entrance of the underworld.
In this way, we can't do anything if we avoid it.
If this person wants to use this treasure to fight the underworld, he must reopen the eyes of the underworld. By then, all the suppression will fall short. The underworld fog will rush out again and cover the whole Saint Earth spirit realm. The Buddha doesn't believe that he can do anything in one night? The venerable man has great ideas." The white skeleton of Bai Gu Mingxiu gently clicked a few times and made a hoarse voice. Just when he finished, in the thick black fog, suddenly a shining white light flashed across the golden bone netherworld, like lightning, and turned into a bright net. When the golden bone netherworld was unprepared, he wrapped it in it. Then Jin Gu Mingxiu seemed to be pulled away in situ, and the shining big net took Jin Gu Mingxiu and shot away in the distance. In the middle of the sky, Xianran showed his birth shape. In his hand, what he held tightly was the golden bone Mingxiu wrapped in the Tian Luo net.
Because he was subject to the Tian Luo net, the golden bone Mingxiu inside could not move.
A sudden change.
There was a lot of chaos in many white bone Mingxiu camps.
The white bone Mingxiu, who seemed to have some identity, quickly shouted, "All people should not get close to the square seal.
Don't give Yi Tian an opportunity. The venerable will not be in any danger."
Just then, a gray shadow suddenly floated out of the golden skeleton wrapped in Tian Luo net and shot away in the distance. The soul of the venerable has been out of danger, and the other party's magic weapon can't hold the venerable. When the white skeleton had just finished, Xianran, who had appeared, suddenly appeared the Millennium Peach with thunder sword in his hand. With the sudden loss of mana, a terrible thunder fell from the sky and shot at the soul of Jin Gu Mingxiu. The previous golden skeleton seemed to be much more cautious. It did not leave the body at the moment when it was bound by the golden net, but suddenly escaped in the process of being dragged.
Moreover, when he ran away, he took precautions against Xianran's thunder sword.
After all, he saw the tragedy of the golden bone repair with his own eyes. Therefore, this thunder unexpectedly split into the air. When the soul of Jin Gumingshu hurriedly fled to the distance, he saw a bang, another thunder fell, and Shenron sent out a terrible blow of thunder sword again. This time, he made a prediction. The soul of Jin Gumingshu was not as lucky as before. It seemed to connect heaven and earth, shine through the whole dark fog, and the thunder roared down and just split on its soul. The frightened soul turned into wisps of smoke in the power of terrible thunder and dissipated. Countless white bone Mingshu were in an uproar and fled to the distance. At this time, Shenron had returned to the side of Shanha Inshan Yi Tian. With a shake, he released the gold skeleton from the Tian Luo net and sent it into his Shumi ring. He had used the Tian Luo net once before. Shenron consumed a lot of mana. After recovering for a while, he took the pill to restore mana. Only then did he reluctantly send out the Tian Luo net. Now his mana was almost exhausted. He put away his net. He motioned and took a pill from Shumi ring and sent it to the entrance. Master. The old slave lived up to his expectations and finally caught the thief. Yi Tian nodded slightly and motioned accordingly. 8 martial god puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory appear on the mountain and river seal. He waved his hand again, and a pile of top-grade fairy jade also appeared next to the martial soul puppet. Get on the flying saucer. After a few breaths, Yi Tian suddenly said after telling the martial spirit puppet task. Then his figure flashed, and he was already on the UFO. Then Liao Tongwen, Situjuanru and Xianrun followed him to the UFO without hesitation. Yi Tian hit the UFO with a mana, and the defense shield opened in an instant. Then suddenly, without warning, a white light flew to the south. When many white bone netherworld practitioners had not reacted, they had disappeared into the thick netherworld fog master. This mountain and river seal? Liao Tongwen looked back at the mountain and river seal suppressed at the entrance of the underworld and asked in doubt. Yi Tian smiled and said, there are martial spirit puppets guarding here, and there are enough top-grade fairy jade. As a teacher, I don't worry about the depletion of fairy jade. The Hades should not be able to take away the mountain and river seal. What we have to do is outside the dark fog, not in the fog. I see. Shifu was worried about the Ming clan killing out the dark fog. Yi Tian nodded slightly, then opened his mind and observed countless Mingshu nearby. Although the other party had no change, his face was still very dignified and didn't look as relaxed as he said. Where the flying saucer passed, countless white bones Mingshu avoided one after another. Yi Tian and others were not attacked by Mingshu and got out of the dark fog smoothly. Shifu, the dark fog is no longer expanding. Seeing the UFO appear, Morong Chanshan's body flashed, came to the UFO and said to Yi Tian with surprise, what method does Shifu use? Can you seal the entrance to the underworld? I suppressed the entrance of the underworld with mountain and river seals. It's not appropriate to say more at this time. Yi Tian glanced at the distance and said to Morong Chanshan in a hurry. The UFO continued to move forward and came to General Yuan Yi in an instant. Lord Yi, thank you so much. The dark fog is no longer expanding, and our people are saved. I can't imagine that Lord Yi is so powerful that he can really stop the spread of the dark fog. As he spoke, General Yuan Yi took a few steps forward and held Yi Tian out of the UFO with a pair of powerful big hands. Yi Tianing said again, General Yuan, it's not time to celebrate. The danger may just begin. All the people must evacuate south as soon as possible, including all the troops. Soon, maybe this will become a cruel battlefield. Are there many monsters in it? Can't so many people stop it? Yuan Yi asked stunningly, pointing to nearly 10,000 disciples of Shueiyue sect branch. Yes, the monsters in the dark fog are at least thousands of times as many as these people. Yi Tian nodded solemnly. So many? So many netherworld practices, you can come and go safely and stop the spread of netherworld fog. How did Lord Yi do it? Yuan Yi changed his look and showed a surprised expression on his face. We can come and go freely, but the monsters inside can't help us, but there are too many of them. The people can't resist them, and conventional hot weapons can't stop them. Listen to me, General Yuan, you evacuate as soon as possible. Yi Tian said solemnly again.
Who knows? Yuan Yi shook his head when he heard the speech. We will do it as soon as possible to organize the evacuation of the people. However, it is absolutely impossible to say that it is our responsibility to evacuate our soldiers from the battlefield. Whether it is the opponent of those monsters or not, our soldiers absolutely have no reason to stay out. General Yuan, listen to my advice. Those monsters are very powerful and can't be resisted by hot weapons. Although Yi Tian respected General Yuan Yi, he advised again. Lord Yi, stop talking. This is our duty. Our soldiers don't care about life and death. We just want to defend the land and defend the country. Even if we die, we will never shrink back, General Yuan Yi said decisively again. Well, General Yuan, if you can't do anything, please retreat as soon as possible. There is Yi here to resist. Yi Tian asked with a glance at the thousands of guns erected in the distance and many soldiers waiting in battle. Then, Yi Tianlu pondered and said again, General Yuan, please contact other war zones. We will support other defense zones immediately. People all over the country are very grateful that you cultivators can stand up when China is in trouble. However, first of all, you should protect your own safety. According to Lord Yi, there are many monsters in the dark fog, and you only have nearly 10,000 people. If you gather together, you may give play to your strong fighting power and more self-protection power. If you are too scattered, I'm afraid I'll be broken by each one. After all, the number of monsters in the dark fog is 1,000 times, 10,000 times more than the number of people here. General Yuan Yi said with some worry. Yi Tian smiled and said, General Yuan, don't worry. You will make proper arrangements and ask General Yuan to contact other theater immediately. Yi will immediately send people to support in case of emergency and ensure the safety of people's lives and property. Yuan Yi looked at Yi Tian suspiciously and said, well, anyway, listen to my advice, Lord Yi, you must do what you can and take care of yourself. With that, he shook Yi Tian's hand heavily, went to the distance and took out the military walkie-talkie. Yi Tian knows very well that it is difficult for ordinary people to use their eyes. Understand the supernatural power of the man of practice. It was useless for him to explain. When Yuan Yi contacted other war zones, he turned to Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru, Old 16 and Old 17, release all disciples to prepare for the war and wait for dispatch. Yes. Master. Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru each agreed, moved their hands, took out a seat dharma and cave, and put them in the open space outside the dark fog. With the opening of the golden defense prohibition of the magic weapon cave, the elders of Tiangong branch and Taisho branch came out of the cave one after another. After receiving the order to prepare for the war, these elders took out the cave again and released more disciples of the Maitreya palace from the magic weapon. In a short time, 600 or 700 magic weapon caves were arranged on a large open space outside the dark fog. Such a large-scale cave appeared on the originally deserted flatland, just like a mirage. Such a prosperous scene appeared out of thin air, which stunned many artillery in the distance. In particular, hundreds of thousands of Maitreya palace disciples poured out of the magic weapon cave. So many people? Seeing the sudden emergence of a large number of monks, Yuan Yi couldn't help staying there. In any case, he could not imagine that Yi Tian had such a great magic power that he had turned out such a number of monks in an instant. In his opinion, these friars are better than the same soldiers and generals, with unpredictable powers. As a general, he could roughly estimate the number of these friars with a glance. He couldn't help but walk to Yi Tian and asked excitedly, Lord Yi, where did these people come from? Yi Tian didn't directly say that these people were all disciples of the Maitreya palace. He smiled and said, General Yuan. Yi had been missing for some time. He went to various spiritual regions, that is, to save soldiers outside the sky. Therefore, he delayed some time and returned to the earth at this time. Although the dark fog has expanded, it seems it's not too late now? When General Yuan Yi heard the speech, he breathed out a long breath and held Yi Tian's hand again. Lord Yi, it's really bothering you. The number of these reinforcements should be about the same as the number of monsters in the underworld? Yi Tian smiled. He shook his head and said, General Yuan, to tell you the truth, the reason why Yi solemnly asked General Yuan to withdraw is that there are too many practices in the dark fog. It is said to be thousands of times, but it is still too much.
At the end of the dark fog, I don't know how many practices haven't appeared, perhaps many times more than the total population of the whole earth. When Yi Tian said this, the cross-country general stayed for a while, then suddenly woke up and said, "This is a very important intelligence. I want to report it to the Supreme Military Command immediately."
It seems that we still underestimated the overall strength of the monsters in the dark fog. Yi Tian watched Yuan Yi go to the distance. His body flashed and flew into the low sky. Looking at the many disciples of the Maitreya Palace who came out of the magic weapon cave, he said loudly, "All disciples are in line." Hearing Yi Tian's order, many disciples immediately took action and quickly lined up in different sequences. In a very short time, neat teams have appeared in front of Yi Tian. Yi Tian looked down at the people in the air and said, "Now is the time of crisis in the Holy Land spiritual domain. In order to protect the safety of the people, we should not hesitate to stand up against the sticks. All disciples must obey the command and kill the enemy bravely." The disciples of the Maitreya Palace stood quietly and listened to the instructions of the night sky. Excitement appeared on their faces, especially those sergeants of Xinfengjun. Hearing that there was a war to fight, they were even more excited. Having a war means that they have the opportunity to make meritorious service. Having the opportunity to make meritorious service means that they can enter the magic eye of palace leader Yi Tian, and there is a chance to join the Maitreya Palace and become real disciples. One by one, they were eager to try, and their fighting intention was very high. Old 17. Looking at the mental state of many disciples, Yi Tian nodded and greeted with satisfaction. Situ Juanru stepped out at the sound, "Master." Old 17, "Take out all the thunder." Hearing Yi Tian's orders, Situ Juanru immediately moved, and together with the elders of the other Tiangong branches gestured one after another. Rows of wooden boxes appeared on the ground. These huge wooden boxes were piled high and extended for a long distance. So many, looking at such a large number of wooden boxes, Yi Tian asked, "Old 17, how many thunderbolts are there?" Shifu. After accepting Shifu's task, the Tiangong division kept forging it day and night. Together with the original thunderbolts of the Tiangong division, the total number so far is about 1.68 million. Good, Old 17. Well done. 1.68 million pieces should be used this time. All disciples below the Golden Elixir realm are allocated 20 thunderbolts each and distributed immediately. At the command of Yi Tian, Situ Juanru immediately organized the disciples of Tiangong branch to start issuing thunderbolts. This side began to get busy. Yi Tian called to an open space again, "Xianrun." Xianrun, who was invisible, suddenly showed up, came to Yi Tian and bowed, "Palace Master, Xianrun is Xianrun, leading 10,000 kamikaze sergeants, 500 Shumi Jia Huafan stones, is responsible for the defense of the First War Zone and the Second World War Zone." As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured, and thousands of Shumi rings with vernacular stones were suspended in the air. Xianrun promised and motioned. Some Shumi precepts flew to his hand as if they had spirit. Xianrun took them in his hand and put them into his Shumi precepts one after another. He turned back and said to Yi Tian, "Palace Master, 500 Shumi precepts have been received." Yi Tian nodded slightly, "Okay, stand aside and wait for orders." Then, he shouted again, "Nieba." Nieba stepped out and bowed to Yi Tian. "Nieba, take the Beast Division, lead 10,000 kamikaze sergeants, 500 Shumi, turn stones, and be responsible for the defense of the Third Theater." Yi Tian said directly, "Two elders from Tiangong branch, Taisho branch and Shuyuzong branch are stationed together." Because Xianrun has a large number of high-level monsters in his hands, Yi Tian directly assigned him defense tasks in 2 war zones. Although the number of monsters in Nieba's hands is much more than Xianrun, the realm is low. If there is no high-level friars to assist, there may be problems. Therefore, Yi Tian assigned him 6 strong people who transform the divine realm. The defense of the 3 theaters has been arranged. Then, Yi Tian looked at Liao Tongguan again, Old 16, led the Taisho branch to garrison the 4th theater, and also led 500 Shumi Jia, Huafanstone and 10,000 Shinfeng army sergeants. Liao Tongguan and Nieba then heard the order, came to Yi Tian and collected the required amount of Shumi Jia into ordinary stones. Yi Tian looked at Situ Juanru again, Old 17. Master. Liao Tunwen bowed and saluted.
The distribution of heavenly works is divided into two groups, each leading 5,000 Sacred Wind Army and 500 Shumi commandments, which are stationed in the 5th and 6th theater respectively. Because Situjuanru has nearly 10,000 original Yuanying martial spirit puppets in his hands, which are the most powerful of all branches, Tian made such an arrangement. As for the 7th war zone, the leader of the palace led the rest of the disciples to garrison in person.
Everyone knows the wonderful use of Huafan stone. We hope to make good use of it. We don't hesitate to spend Huafan stone. We must try every means to stop Mingxiu from walking out of the dark fog and ensure the safety of the people.
In addition to doing a good job in the defense of our own defense zone, the disciples of all departments should also timely reinforce the defense zone where the war is tight when they have spare power delay. Tian paused and continued, our current task is mainly to cover the evacuation of the people and ensure that they have enough time to evacuate. When many people arrive at a safe place, we can let go of our hands and feet. Disciples of all departments should remember not to be greedy for work and do not rush into the fog to fight with Mingxiu.
They just need to beat Mingxiu back into the dark fog. If there are violators, engage in the palace rules.
Look at the low-level disciples roaring thunder.
Tian stopped talking.
He moved and came to Yuan Yi not far away. General Yuan, please explain the location of each defense theater in detail.
I'll send someone to help the defense immediately.
Yuan Yi nodded at once. Well, the 7 defensive war zones are actually set up mainly based on 7 large cities to ensure the safety of the people moving south to major cities.
The city behind the 7 war zones is our last barrier. Please see the map with me for the specific location.
As he spoke, General Yuan Yi waved his hand to the side. An officer came over and spread a huge map on the ground. With a pencil in his hand, General Yuan Yi drew the positions of the other 6 defensive war zones on the map one by one. As Tian listened, he took out a jade slip to record. Then, according to General Yuan Yi, he painted the distribution map of each war zone on the jade slip. When General Yuan Yi finished, Tian's map had been completed.
Well, General Yuan Yi, I'll arrange personnel to garrison immediately.
With that, Tian turned and returned to the disciples of the Maitreya Palace. The other 6 war zones mentioned by General Yuan Yi are not the tasks assigned by Tian. They are the 1st, 2nd and 3rd order numbers as the names of the war zones, but have their own names.
But Tian added sequence arrangement for the convenience of arranging combat tasks.
Among the jade slips he burned, Tian specially added the serial number and name he arranged in addition to the original name of the war zone. In addition, Tian marked in detail the salient features of each theater, as well as the location and distance. He handed the jade slips to the principals of various departments who supported the disciples and asked them to read them in detail one by one.
Lord Yi.
Just as everyone took turns to check the jade slips, suddenly, General Yuan Yi hurried over with a mobile phone.
Tian moved and fell in front of the field and asked, General Yuan, what happened?
Lord Yi, when I just contacted the Pingqing War Zone, I learned that an accident happened in the Pingqing War Zone, and a large number of monsters suddenly burst out in the dark fog.
The Pingqing War Zone also uses artillery.
Unfortunately, it is difficult for artillery to hit those monsters, and even if they hit monsters, it is difficult to cause damage to each other.
Now the Pingqing War Zone is very tight.
Please send someone immediately rush to help.
Yuan Yi said with an ugly face.
Tian nodded slightly and ordered loudly, Xianrun, take people to the 1st war zone immediately.
General Yuan Yi's Pingqing Theater is the garrison marked by Tian as the 1st theater. It is about 10,000 miles from Tian's current position.
It's the furthest theater from him. Because Xianrun's speed was fast, Tian arranged all the 2 furthest war zones for Xianrun.
Military intelligence is in order. Moreover, with Xianrun's ear, he has heard what Yuan Yi said just now. He is also very clear that the 2 war zones he should garrison include this Pingqing war zone. He didn't dare to neglect it.
He immediately called his 10,000 God Division disciples into the cave. He rolled up his sleeves, rolled up more than 10 boxes of thunderbolts and sent them to Shumi Ring. Some kamikaze sergeants have not received the thunderbolt yet, so they will be swept away together and distributed after they have reached the station and lifted the current crisis. The other departments also know that the military situation is urgent. Since there are already Mingxiu out of the fog in the Pingqing theater, it is likely that the Mingxiu in other places will also come out of the fog after more than 10 breaths. Xin Run's department was ready. He put away all his magic weapons in the cave, stepped on the Banxian soldier's flying sword and fled to the distance. At this time, the disciples of the other 5 departments have also been ready. The leaders of each department hold fists to Yi Tianyi one after another and fly away.
Lord Ko. Duan Jingxiu. After they left, Yi Tian suddenly called. Ko Yuanxuan and Duan Jingxiu crossed the crowd and came out to Yi Tian. Master.
Yi Tian said directly, lead the disciples of the headquarters to arrange Wawawafen stone immediately.
It should be fast.
Moreover, when the teacher is no longer here, you have full authority to command all the disciples to defend.
Yes, Master.
Ko Yuanxuan and Duan Jingxiu bowed down to lead the order. These friars have used Huafan stone in several world wars and know the magical function of Huafan stone. Without Yi Tian saying more, Duan Jingxiu and Ko Yuanxuan took the high-level friars of their headquarters and received more than 700 Sumi precepts from Yi Tian.
Separate from the east and west, and start to arrange at a distance.
A large area of Huafan stone is scattered on the edge of the fog, about 3 feet wide, extending to the distance, forming a defense zone completely made of Huafan stone.
Yi Tian was not idle. His mind moved.
More than 300 Wohunki puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory appeared in the air. With a flash of his thought, these soulless puppets fled to the east and west sides to prevent those disciples from being suddenly attacked by the Ming clan before the Huafan stone isolation belt was arranged.
It's pretty quiet here.
At this time, the Pingqing theater, that is, the first theater, thousands of miles away, was in a mess. On the artillery position about 6 or 7 miles away from the edge of the fog sea, thousands of artillery are frantically firing artillery fire at the surging many Mingxiu. However, the gunfire didn't stop Mingxiu's attack, and the roaring submachine gun didn't delay Mingxiu's figure. Those Mingxiu flew towards the artillery position at high altitude, and most of the artillery fire and bullets hit the air. But it also caused a small amount of damage to some low-level meditation because of intensive firepower and terrorist artillery attacks.
However, this kind of killing is so insignificant for the massive Ming offensive.
General Li, no, this is not the way. The attack of those monsters is too fierce for us to stop. An officer in the artillery position hurried over and said to the white-haired General Li Guangzhan. General Li Guangzhan looked at a large number of Mingxius getting closer and closer, and said to the officers, let's hold on for a while, and the reinforcements will arrive soon. General Li, I know the kamikaze army is very powerful, but these monsters are not comparable to the monks who came from heaven.
I'm afraid the reinforcements have no way to take them.
The officer said anxiously, General, you withdraw first and I'll hold it here.
General Li frowned and said loudly, this is my battlefield, this is my position,
Li Guangzhan is by no means an escaped general. No matter whether kamikaze can beat monsters today, whether we live or die, we won't let an inch of land here.
Even if it's death, I'll die here.
General, don't make unnecessary sacrifices.
There are so many people who need you to command the evacuation.
General Li needs to bear greater responsibilities in the future. The officer said painstakingly, if the general doesn't go, it's too late. It's more than 10,000 miles from Mabe.
When the reinforcements arrive, I'm afraid we're all finished. Don't say any more. If we insist on one more second, the people will have one more second to retreat. We can't let these monsters rush past us. Even if they rush past, they will step on our bodies. General Li Guangzhan knew very well that even if the reinforcements came by plane, they could not arrive here in time, but now he had no choice. There are more than 20,000 troops here, but the number of monsters in conflict from the fog doesn't know, maybe 100,000 or hundreds of thousands, because there are monsters everywhere, stretching for more than 10 or tens of miles, and countless monsters can be seen in the distance. If all these 20,000 people retreat, they may not be safely evacuated and will be buried in the hands of the monster. Insisting here may buy more time for the evacuation of the people.
As a soldier, he has long been ready to wrap his body in a suit. Therefore, he has no choice now. Warriors, at the moment of life and death, we fight with monsters. Looking at the approaching Ming Xiu, General Li Guangzhan pulled out his pistol from the holster around his waist and shouted. He raised his hand and shot at a white bone Ming Xiu who ran towards him. The bullet hit white bone Ming Xiu and made a clang sound. The bullet was shot away, but the white bone Ming Xiu didn't hurt at all. This is destined to be a catastrophe. The combat effectiveness of monsters is not at the same level as that of humans, even if they use cash weapons. Under such circumstances, General Li Guangzhan could not help but sigh. The white skeleton shot by General Li Guangzhan was originally flying towards the artillery position. It was suddenly hit by a bullet and suddenly turned its head. Two groups of fireworks flickering and jumping in the sockets of its eyes looked at General Li Guangzhan. Then he took a turn, holding a bone sword, and flew towards General Li Guangzhan. Its speed is as fast as a flash of white light. Be careful, General, a nearby officer shouted quickly, and a shuttle bullet hit the white skeleton. Who knows, the hardness of your white skeleton is like steel. Bullets are fired on your body, making a chirping sound, and even sparks caused by severe friction. But the white skeleton was unharmed, not hurt at all, not even half a minute slow. General Li Guangzhan and the officer were deeply worried. In the face of such a powerful white bone Ming Xiu, they knew that it would be difficult to escape this disaster. When they thought the disaster was coming, they suddenly heard a bang in their ears. Within the sight, the white skeleton suddenly burst open and turned into countless pieces of bones flying around. Many of the white bone fragments are flying towards General Li Guangzhan and the officer. They are also like a flash of white light. Their speed and prestige are even stronger than the bullets fired by guns. Li Guangzhan and the officer were mortal tools. They were suddenly attacked by such a terrorist attack. Although they knew they could not escape, they also subconsciously squatted and dodged. Who? Just before they squatted down, more than a dozen pieces of bone had been shot, and suddenly a strong wind flew by, which happened to roll those pieces of bone. Li Guangzhan and the officer were stunned. Isn't this wind too strange? When they were stunned, an old man appeared out of thin air. Then, like a magic trick, countless monsters appeared from his side out of thin air, flew around and jumped at the approaching white bone Ming Xiu. The old man has a steady stream of monsters. It seems endless. In an instant, it gushes out like the sky and the earth. In the sky, there are endless monsters in addition to countless white bone netherworld practices, and with the white bone netherworld practices constantly flying out of the fog sea, the two collide with each other. It's like two charging armies colliding together, a fierce war. Imminent. When General Li Guangzhan was fascinated, he felt that his shoulder was suddenly tight, and his body shape had been grasped by the old man and flew away to the distance. In the flight, there are still countless monsters pouring out of the old man and joining the battle group with the white bone monster. Is the old gentleman? Li Guangzhan asked suspiciously, standing in the air and being carried in his hand by Xianrun. Don't worry, General. We are reinforcements from Mabe City. Xianrun explained briefly. General Li Guangzhan had been taken a long distance by Xianrun, and then he gently put it on the ground. Xianrun didn't say a word anymore. He turned and left. There were still a steady stream of monsters on him and joined the amazing war. What powerful monsters! General Li Guangzhan murmured. In his sight, those monsters were much stronger than the white bone monsters surging out of the fog. Any beast, under an impact. Those white skeleton monsters were beaten to pieces. The old man should be at least 50 or 60 years old according to his appearance, but his body is fast, which is by no means comparable to ordinary old people of the same age. With a sword in hand, there are many white bone monsters who are cut and torn apart into countless white bone fragments. Occasionally, the man took out a wooden sword and struck it at random. A violent thunder fell from the sky, like the Thunder Lord in the sky, which was frightening. What a powerful old gentleman! General Li Guangzhan whispered and was determined when he saw the situation. Although the old man looked older, he was invincible against the white bone monster. No white bone monster was his enemy. Originally, those seemingly brave and invincible white bone monsters, under the attack of the old man and many beasts, seemed vulnerable and retreated one after another. At the next moment, a scene that surprised General Li Guangzhan suddenly appeared again. He saw that some beasts were originally in the shape of wild animals, but suddenly turned into human shapes when fighting against the white bone monster.
But it is different from ordinary people.
It obviously has the characteristics of some wild animals.
Is this the legendary monster?
General Li Guangzhan also found that those monsters who can change their adult form are also terrible, and their skills are no different from that of the old man. In the face of countless white bone monsters, he broke into the group of white bone monsters without any fear, and was equally invincible. Just when General Li Guangzhan was calm in his mind, a voice as thin as a gnat suddenly came to his ear. He heard what the old man said. He only heard the old man say, "General, take your team away from here quickly, otherwise the old man can't let go." At this time, General Li Guangzhan really realized that there was a huge gap between practitioners and ordinary people. Even the powerful army with modern weapons seemed so weak and vulnerable in front of these mysterious practitioners. Order everyone to retreat, artillery battalion to retreat and infantry battalion to retreat. General Li Guangzhan knew that Xian Run had his truth, so he immediately shouted the order. With his command, the car engines pulling the artillery sounded one after another, and then the artillery car moved forward slowly. The infantry armed with submachine guns also retreated back in a defensive formation with the artillery vehicle. In situ, only Li Guang and Zhang Jianjun continued to watch the strange battle in front of them. Those monsters are strange. The species are also extremely strange.
In General Li Guangzhan's view, there are few monsters that can be recognized.
These monsters can go from heaven to earth with extremely fast speed and infinite power.
They can smash the white bone monsters that can't be penetrated by bullets with one blow.
The roar of the beast seemed to shake the world. Thunder roared from time to time in the sky.
Some monsters fell to the ground, and their huge and heavy bodies hit the ground, like an earthquake.
If you don't see these monsters flying out of the old man with your own eyes, if you first see this scene, it is estimated that anyone will feel extreme collapse and shock in his heart.
There are all kinds of wonders in the world.
Unexpectedly, it was an old man and these strange monsters who saved the disaster. If the old man and these monsters did not appear at the right time, General Li Guangzhan believed that not only the soldiers of these artillery battalions, but also the soldiers of the infantry battalions, and even the countless people moving south might be slaughtered by the white bone monster. However, at the most dangerous moment, the rescue came like heaven and saved the catastrophe. Since more than a year ago, Tian friars came to the earth. Tian led the Sacred Wind Army to defeat the strong enemy and keep peace. General Li Guangzhan felt that he had enough knowledge of the power of cultivators, and he also vigorously selected soldiers with considerable cultivation qualifications in the army to cultivate ancient martial arts. However, his understanding of practice and the power of practitioners is not worth mentioning compared with the power of the old man and many monsters in front of him. It is really a world of difference. Not long ago, he talked with General Yuan Yi on the phone. That is, on the phone, Yuan Yi simply said that Yi Tian came back and moved to other spiritual regions to ask for help. From what he saw in front of him, Li Guangzhan had secretly guessed that Yi Tian probably invited some senior experts back to save the earth. When he thought about it, he was puzzled. Since ancient times, there were people outside people and there were days outside the world. It was not a matter on the earth. It was naturally difficult for people on the earth to understand. The universe is so big that it's strange. But Yi Tian is very powerful. It's really difficult for him to find so many rescuers in distant star regions. Thinking so, General Li Guangzhan learned from the ancient rites, hugged Xian Run, and said loudly, "On behalf of the people here, I thank the old man for his help." General Li Guangzhan had just finished, and a voice as fine as a mosquito and ant came to his ear. "Don't be polite, old general. I came to the Holy Land with my master." As the master's slave, old man only followed his master's lead. It's reasonable to make a little effort for the Holy Land. I don't dare to be a general. For Yi Tian's reason, Xian Run spoke very politely to the old general. "Oh, so it is. Old man, if you have the opportunity to introduce me to your master, we should thank your master," Li Guangzhan said, stunned and hurried.
In Li Guangzhan's opinion, Xianrun's cultivation has the ability to connect heaven and earth. If such a terrible character is only a servant, then his master can imagine how well he should be. Li Guangzhan wants to meet his master, whether out of gratitude or the follow-up defense of the earth. Hearing the speech, Xianrun not only smiled, "Old general, my master is no one else." He said his name irreverently. "Shanya, Tian, my master is Tian." "What? Tian?"
General Li Guangzhan was stunned.
Tian? He once saw Tian's skill.
Although he was shocked by heaven and man at that time, he killed many monks outside the sky with his own strength. However, although General Li Guangzhan is only immortal, he also has his own vision and can distinguish that there is still a big gap between Tian's cultivation and the old man in front of him. The old man called Tian the master. It's really strange. If he really knew Tian, he might have a duplicate name. General Li Guangzhan thought so. He asked again in a loud voice, "Old sir, which Tian do you mean?" "Ha ha." Xianrun smiled, "Old general, as far as I know, there is only one Tian. My master is Tian, the master of the Maitreya Palace on the Earth Star."
It's really him. At this moment, Li Guangzhan petrified in an instant.
At this time, Xianrun's eyes coagulated slightly and quickly said to General Li Guangzhan, "General, please retreat quickly. The other war zones are now attacked by the Ming clan at the same time. I don't know how far this war will develop." Before leaving, the master sent a message to me, asking me to protect the generals in the army and ask the veteran generals to go for convenience. The old man is really powerful. I admire him for knowing the situation of other war zones here. But other war zones have been attacked. The old man can't stand idly by. Please go and support. Li Guangzhan said as he retreated. Naturally, the task assigned to me by my master is to assist in the defense of the First War Zone and the Second World War Zone. If the war in other war zones is tight, I will naturally go to support, but it seems that the rest of the war zones are under control. Each war zone has disciples from the Maitreya Palace to assist in the defense, and the Hades don't have to take advantage of it. Xianrun said while summoning and sending out a divine idea to the monster. After listening to Xianrun's words, General Li Guangzhan relaxed a little, but he still asked suspiciously, "Old sir, how many reinforcements have come this time?" Xianrun said patiently, "Don't worry, the old general. Although the number of reinforcements is not much, which is far less than the number of Mingxiu, they are all excellent soldiers and strong generals. Under the leadership of our master, we will certainly protect the Holy Land and the spiritual domain." At this point, Xianrun saw that some of the demons that had retreated were included in the ring of spirit beasts. Then he flashed, stepped on the Banxian soldier's flying sword and shot away in the distance. In an instant, he had disappeared from General Li Guangzhan's vision. Seeing that Xianrun took many monsters to other war zones for support, General Li Guangzhan was a little calmer. At this time, due to the transfer of standing force, the number of monsters was reduced by nearly half. And monsters that can turn into shapes. As many as 4 were taken away by Xianrun, and his strength decreased sharply. General Li Guangzhan paid full attention to his current war situation. Although the war between the two sides was fierce, as immortal, General Li Guangzhan did not pose any threat to Mingxiu. Therefore, although he was close to the battlefield, he did not attract Mingxiu's attention or attack him. Therefore, he was safe for the time being. Although the previous confrontation between the demon beast and Mingxiu was short, under the fierce killing of tens of thousands of high-level demon beasts led by Xianrun, Mingxiu's offensive has been completely restrained, and countless Mingxiu were killed outside the dark fog. At present, the remaining meditation began to shrink back and slowly retreat into the fog. The number of nether practitioners who are still fighting with monsters outside the fog is decreasing rapidly. At this time, General Li Guangzhan finally breathed a long sigh. At present, his theater has been prevented. "General Yuan, what's the situation there?" Thinking that other war zones mentioned by Xianrun were attacked by Mingxiu on a large scale, General Li Guangzhan immediately took out the phone and dialed General Yuan Yi. "General Li, please don't worry." Yuan Yi's voice came over the phone. "Since Lord Yi can go deep into the fog and stop the dark fog from spreading outward, he will be able to repel the attack of Mingxiu. At present, my situation here is stable.
Although Mingxiu's attack is fierce, Lord Yi will sit here. He will be absolutely safe. Well, General Yuan, what about the rest of the war zones? Li Guangzhan asked. Yuan Yi continued, General Li, don't worry. Lord Yi arranged defense in front of me. All 7 war zones sent friars to garrison. Moreover, once the situation in each war zone is tight, reinforcements from other war zones will arrive.
There may be some small fluctuations, but the whole situation should be under Yi Tian's control.
Well, very well, General Yuan, I have to admire your original vision.
If you hadn't lifted the curfew and established the Sacred Wind Army, we would really miss talents like Yi Tian.
If we missed them, we might not be able to establish such close ties.
So, General Yuan, you are a great hero. General Li Guangzhan had just said this when a deafening noise came from the receiver of the telephone. General Li Guangzhan felt very strange to this sound. It was not the sound of shells fired by conventional artillery, but clearer than the explosion sound of artillery. It seemed to accumulate a lot of energy, and the sound was more crisp and explosive. Out of curiosity, he hurriedly asked, General Yuan, have you introduced new guns there? No, General Li, this is not a cannon in the army.
This is a magic weapon brought by Lord Yi.
This magic weapon is somewhat similar to the grenade in the army, but its power is 10 million times greater.
The power of this magic weapon explosion can even kill 8 or 9 white bone monsters at a time. It really opened people's eyes. Yuan Yi took a look at the rumbling explosion in the distance and swallowed his saliva.
General Yuan, please ask Lord Yi.
How many such magic weapons does he have? Can you configure them for the army? Li Guangzhan asked hurriedly.
Haha, General Li, you don't have to think about it. I also have this idea. Just after communicating with Lord Yi, this magic weapon can't be used by ordinary people. Only practitioners can inspire it through magic power. However, Lord Yi doesn't have much in hand, because he may have a long-term battle with Mingxiu in the future. They are also saving money, including Lord Ye's people use. When the two talked, the defensive war in the 7th Theater was in full swing. Because Yi Tian arranged Huafan Stone here for the first time, when the first batch of Mingxiu rushed out of the fog, they rushed into the influence area of Huafan without knowing it. As a result, it can be imagined that due to the magical effect of Huafan Stone, those white bone Mingxiu suddenly lost their mana, suffered heavy losses under the attack of the disciples of the Maitreya Palace, and fell a large number of Mingxiu. After a big loss, those Mingxiu gradually found that the Black Sand had the effect of suppressing their mana. Therefore, in the subsequent attack, they deliberately avoided the area where Huafan Stone was laid and chose the position where Huafan Stone had not been laid. In this case, the thunderbolt sent by Yi Tian came in handy. This is the first time Yi Tian used this thunderbolt in World War II. The result also surprised him greatly. It is indeed a very effective means to deal with Mingxiu, which is very lethal. For these disciples of the Maitreya Palace who are not high in their own realm, it is an effective weapon that can not only kill the enemy, but also form self-protection. At this time, under the double obstruction of Huafan Stone and Thunderbolt, the nether cultivation here began to retreat slowly, and finally withdrew to the scope of the nether fog. Yi Tianchen was in the air, released his mind, covered the other 6 war zones and observed them carefully. A moment later, his body slowly fell to the ground, and then a magic weapon cave fell to the ground and quickly enlarged. As the door of the magic weapon cave was closed, Yi Tian said in a low voice, "For Taoist friends can come out." As soon as the voice fell, Shiran walked out of the magic weapon cave and 4 female practitioners such as Gu Shangjuan. Yi Daoyu, this is? As soon as the 4 nuns came out of the cave, they immediately observed the surrounding situation curiously. When they saw the strange scene in front of them, the busy disciples of the Maitreya Palace and the white bones and skeletons everywhere, they couldn't help showing an unexpected expression. When their eyes fell on the boundless dark fog like a black cloud, there was a trace of panic on their faces. For Taoist friends, this is the end of this trip. Holy Land. According to the previous agreement, you will no longer take you around. Here, you have absolute freedom and the right to decide your own way. Yi Tian looked at the 4 and said, however, it's still necessary for Yi to tell you about the current situation.
This thick black fog is the dark fog released by the underworld. You should have a certain understanding of the underworld when you are in the two barbarian spirit. What you wants to say is that there is a far more ferocious underworld than the two barbarian spirit domain, and these black fog are released by the underworld. The strength of the underworld is stronger than that of the two barbarian spirit domain. The underworld is much stronger. Now, the underworld invades the Holy Land in spiritual realm. There has just been a big war here. From the current situation, the war with the underworld should not end in a short time. Tian slowly introduced. Gu Shangjuan looked at each other and said nothing. A moment later, Gu Shangjuan took the lead in saying, Yi Daoyu, the four sisters have discussed it. If Yi Daoyu doesn't dislike it, the four sisters ask for the Maitreya Palace. Yi Tian was not surprised. He glanced at the four women and said, the Maitreya Palace is full of talents, but not everyone wants to join the Maitreya Palace. At present, there are more than 40,000 kamikaze soldiers who have failed to do so. Anyone who joins the Maitreya Palace must obey the 72 laws of the Maitreya Palace. If the four Taoist friends can't do it, the outcome may not be so good. As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured, and a jade slip appeared in his hand and handed it to Gu Shangjuan. For Taoist friends can take a look at the 72 law of the Maitreya Palace first. If there is no problem, Yi is naturally welcome. Gu Shangjuan pasted the jade slips on his forehead, carefully examined them, and then handed them to the nun next to him. When the four finished reading, they exchanged their eyes and nodded slightly. Or Gu Shangjuan said, Yi Daoyu, these are no problem. We all come from the clan or family. Naturally, we know that the state-owned national law and family rules. As disciples of the Maitreya Palace, it is natural to abide by the 72 laws of the Maitreya Palace. Well, since the four are willing to join the palace, Yi has no reason to refuse. On behalf of all the disciples of the Maitreya Palace, I welcome you to join. Yi Tian finally nodded slightly. Thank you for your help. When Gu Shangjuan heard the speech, they were all happy and said to Yi Tian, Okay. Yi Tian nodded slightly and said, Since you have joined Maitreya Palace, the family will not speak two words. Yi is very optimistic about the cultivation qualification of the four and has high expectations for the four. I hope you can devote yourself to cultivation and strive to climb the avenue as soon as possible. Yes. Thank you for your love, the four women bowed together. Then Gu Shangjuan pondered and said, Lord Yi, we know that the war with the underworld may be very difficult. Our four sisters were captured by the underworld when they were in the time and spirit domain. If we didn't meet the palace lord, the consequences might be unimaginable, so we have a deep hatred for the underworld. The four disciples asked to join the battle against the underworld. Hearing the speech, Yi Tian waved his hand and said, You have just joined the Maitreya Palace. You don't need to join the battle immediately. All new disciples of the Maitreya Palace will perform bone cutting and marrow washing after they start. Your temporary task is to take the spirit wine of bone cutting and marrow washing, improve your cultivation qualification and remove all obstacles for cultivation. As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured and a jade bottle appeared in his hand. Then he moved again, took out a wooden spoon from Zumaji and gave it to Gu Shangjuan. This is the spirit wine for cutting bones and washing marrow. After you enter the cave, take 1 spoonful each. Don't be greedy for more, otherwise it will be harmful and unhelpful. After taking it, refine the medicine power of the spirit wine immediately. If there is something you need to deal with in the future, our palace master will call you out. In addition, the disciples who join the Maitreya Palace will allocate corresponding cultivation resources according to the palace rules. Each of you four will a man has a half-immortal soldier flying sword and 100 immortal jade. As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured continuously, took out 4 Bansian soldier flying swords and handed them to the 4 people respectively. Then he took out a storage bag again and handed it to Gu Shangjuan. This is Xianyu. You can distribute it yourself. If there is nothing else, you can enter the cave immediately and take the spirit wine of cutting bones and washing marrow, which may bring you an unexpected surprise. Thank you for your kindness. Looking at the jade bottle in his hand and the half-immortal soldier flying sword just obtained, Gu Shangjuan's 4 faces bowed to Yi Tian with joy. Well, there's nothing else here.
You go to cut bones and wash marrow first, and then practice. The four women said no more and promised to rush into the cave after saluting Yi Tian. They also looked forward to the magical effect of the spirit wine that Yi Tian solemnly took out for them to cut bones and wash marrow. After dealing with Gu Shangjuan and other four female practitioners, Yi Tian took a look at the many disciples of the Maitreya Palace who were busy. Because there are Ko Yuanchuan and Duan Jingxiu, many kamikaze soldiers arrange Huafanstone to be busy without chaos.
Everything is in order. Yi Tian is relieved.
Through the vision of Lianqin insect, Yi Tian found that countless meditation began to shrink in the dark fog, and there seemed to be no sign of breaking out of the dark fog in a short time. The next moment, he motioned, summoned the golden eye god carving, stepped forward and stepped on the back of the golden eye. After receiving his instructions, the golden eye eagle flapped its wings and disappeared in the distance in an instant. Next, Yi Tian visited the other 6 war zones one by one. In fact, as long as we let go of the idea of God, the situation in the other 6 war zones will be clear at a glance, all within the coverage of the idea of God.
However, Yi Tian left in person.
As the leader of the Maitreya Palace, he naturally wanted to cheer up the disciples in the palace.
Each theater has just experienced a successful battle. The morale of both the army and the disciples of the Maitreya Palace is very high.
With the arrival of Yi Tian, the theater cheers everywhere, and the scene is very spectacular. The other 6 war zones, except the 3rd war zone where Miaba is located, have experienced a fierce battle. The battlefield is in a mess, and there are many casualties in the rushed-out Ningxiu. Because the Beast Division led by Miaba governs nearly 400,000 monsters. Although the realm of these monsters is not high, the victory lies in the large number, which looks very frightening. Therefore, after rushing out of the fog, Ningxiu saw such a momentum and did not collide directly with these monsters, so he went straight without fighting and returned to the dark fog.
Such a war avoidance behavior, without a real war, makes Miaba and others feel very unhappy and have some regrets in their hearts. Here, Yi Tian is naturally encouraged. In each theater, Yi Tian mainly inspected the layout of Huafanstone. All departments and war zones have implemented very well and are laying them step by step. Because of the huge amount of work, it will take some time to arrange them all. He finally came to the 1st war zone. General Li Guangzhan was his old acquaintance. When they first met, they naturally had to greet each other. Then General Li Guangzhan held Yi Tian's hand with emotion and said, "Lord Yi, thanks to you this time, otherwise the consequences will be unimaginable. With you, I believe we will be able to hold this land and not let the Hades go any further." Guard?
Hearing the speech, Yi Tian smiled. "General Li, keeping is not the goal.
Our goal is to eliminate those netherworld practices.
We will not only destroy them, but even find ways to disperse those netherworld fog and return us to a lang lang heaven and earth in China." General Li Guangzhan was slightly stunned at the speech, glanced at Yi Tian and said, "It's a good thing that Lord Yi has such ambition, but those white bone monsters are so powerful that I saw the scene of the nether cultivation rushing out of the nether fog. According to my guess, there are still many nether cultivation in the nether fog. Although the strength of the Maitreya Palace is strong, I don't want to see the disciples of the Maitreya Palace pay too much price in the fight with the Nether clan. As long as they can be sealed, temporarily lock the white bone monster out of the fog. As for other things, we can slowly figure it out."
Moreover, the area of the dark fog with an area of more than 100,000 square kilometers is so vast.
It can't be done in a short time to control the pollution of the dark fog. Lord Yi, don't be too hasty. Yi Tian knows that from the perspective of General Li Guangzhan, what he said is naturally reasonable and justified. It is not aimless.
But General Li Guangzhan only knew one thing and did not know the other.
He did not know enough about the Earth Star crisis.
Up to now, the enemy in his heart is only the underworld.
I'm afraid General Li Guangzhan knows nothing about the demon world. At this time, when the war was in chaos, Yi Tian didn't give General Li Guangzhan too much pressure, and also didn't mention the demon world. While the two were talking, Li Guangzhan's phone suddenly rang.
Take out the phone from his pocket.
Li Guangzhan glanced at the caller ID, nodded slightly to Yi Tian and said, "Lord Yi, answer the phone."
"Excuse me for the time being."
"General Li, please help yourself."
Yi Tian also nodded slightly and left here to Xianrun not far away. Master.
Seeing Yi Tian coming, Xianrun said respectfully.
Xianrun, what do you think of the war just now? Yi Tian nodded slightly and asked.
Xianrun said in a deep voice, Master, as far as I can see, the level of Mingxiu coming out of the dark fog is too high, and the number of strong people is very rare. It is out of proportion to the strong people of the Ming nationality we saw in the fog sea before.
I think this attack is just a tentative attack by Mingxiu.
Hearing the speech, Yi Tian turned to look at the direction of the fog sea, pondered for a moment, and said, Your feeling is actually the same as mine. This time, not only did they not send out too many high-level strongmen, but also did not launch a fierce and fearless attack.
It can be said that it is a quick touch. What tricks do you think Mingxiu is playing?
In my opinion, I don't think the underworld actually wants to fight out of the underworld. Maybe because the two gold bone puppets fell one after another, the practitioners of the underworld have a certain fear in their hearts, so. At this time, Yi Tian shook his head. Although there is some truth in what you said, the truth may not be so. There are many brave and fearless people in the netherworld, which I have learned in the battle between the time and spirit domain and the nether family. The fierce and mortal situation of the nether family continues one after another. The highest power in the netherworld should not be just those golden bones. This test is true, but I think they are therefore, the purpose of hiding in the fog should be to avoid the truth and attract the strength of our Mithraea palace, so that the other 6 entrances of the underworld can continuously gush out of the underworld fog. That is, they abandon this one entrance of the underworld and preserve the other 6 entrances of the underworld overseas. If we spend here with the underworld and take full defense, it is likely that it will be, he said, the dark things coming out of the 6 entrances of the underworld will cover the whole Earth star. So? Xianrun knew that Yi Tian must have something to say later, so he asked half a sentence.
Yi Tian nodded slightly and confirmed, You should have guessed.
I want to attack after I have stabilized my defense. However, it seems that I am not strong enough to fight the whole underworld with the power of the one sect of the Mira Palace and protect the safety of the Chinese people.
What does the master mean? Xianrun asked carefully while guessing Yi Tian's intention of saying these words.
Well, Xianrun, I want to cut the mess quickly and solve the battle here as soon as possible.
The most direct way is to go deep into the dark fog and not kill the Mingxiu trapped in the dark fog.
However, together with the fierce battle, the Mingxiu will not be trapped in the dark fog and will certainly break through on a large scale. In that case, it will put a lot of pressure on the defense of the Mithraea Palace. I don't want to have too much damage to the land of the Mithraea Palace, therefore, the important task of defense can only be handed over to those monsters.
Yi Tian said in a deep voice.
Understand, the old slave must try his best to drive the monster under his control and prevent the breakthrough of Mingxiu.
Xianrun immediately patted his chest.
Well, you should make proper arrangements right away, and the defense mainly depends on you. You must not make a meditation breakout. If you get out of our sight, it may cause immeasurable losses to the whole China.
So you should do anything.
Because it matters, Yi Tian solemnly charged again. Understand, Master, Xianrun would rather fight all the monsters at all costs than block all the Mingxiu in the defense area.
Xianrun bowed and said.
Well, go and urge our disciples to arrange Huafan stones as soon as possible.
This is the most effective guarantee to prevent Mingxiu from breaking through and destroy them in the blockade area.
See if General Li Guanzhan has finished answering the phone and comes here.
Yi Tian says to Xianrun. Xianrun agreed, turned and left, and went to decorate.
Lord Yi, I just received a call from the General Military Command. All the media have reported that the Mithraea Palace has effectively prevented the spread of the dark fog and the war against the white bone monster.
This huge victory is very exciting.
The whole country is boiling. The people all over the country are paying attention to the situation here. The Supreme Military Command asked me to tell Lord Yi and all the brothers of the Mithraea Palace I would like to express my deep gratitude.
Yi Tian waved his hand and said with a smile, We are all Chinese children. This is what we should do. General Li, don't be polite.
Please tell General Li to the Supreme Military Command. After all, Yi Tian led the disciples of the Mithraea Palace.
After all, we worked hard to curb the attack of the nether cultivation in an all-round way, and wiped out all the nether cultivation that had invaded the earth in a short time. Okay, I'll call. The Supreme Military Command has issued an order about fighting the white bone monster. Let all war zones give the Maitreya Palace enough action space and arrange the battle plan by ourselves. If we need our cooperation, please don't be polite, Lord Yi. We will go all out. Yi Tian said in a deep voice, we don't have any requirements in other aspects. We need to keep the communication unblocked. If there is meditation anywhere, please inform us in time and we will go to support in a short time. Yi also knows that General Li and other generals are responsible for defending the country and can't leave the theater without authorization, but Yi still requests all troops to retreat for a distance, leave and reserve enough safe space so that the Maitreya Palace can have enough display space, otherwise it will be suppressed. This matter is very important, so Yi Tian mentioned it again and again. Well, Lord Yi, this is no problem. The important task of defending China will be handed over to your Maitreya Palace. We are waiting for the news of victory. Speaking of this, General Li Guangzhang glanced at the many disciples of the Maitreya Palace who were arranging Huafan stone. He hesitated and asked, Lord Yi, although we know very little about the means of monks. We also know that there are many means that ordinary people can't understand, but I'm still curious about the role of these monks in laying black sand. Yi Tian smiled and said, this is a means to prevent the nether cultivation from highlighting the nether fog. These black sand can greatly reduce their combat effectiveness. Even the most terrible nether cultivation can't play its magic power like an ordinary white skeleton. Is it so magical? General Li Guangzhang said in surprise. After a little meditation, he suddenly said to Yi Tian again, Lord Yi, since this sand gauze can make Ming practice lose mana, just like ordinary people. Then, there are tens of thousands of practitioners of ancient martial arts in the army. Although they generally have low accomplishments, they are really much better than ordinary people. The meaning of the Supreme Command is to see if they can be used as well? Yi Tian knew about selecting soldiers with good qualifications to cultivate ancient martial arts, and he knew it more than a year ago. Although he is not sure exactly what extent these soldiers are practicing, it can be imagined that there will be a great difference compared with the children of the palace of the palace of the palace. After all, the starting point is different, the resources are different, and the inheritance is limited. Even if the current cultivation level and strength of the main disciples of the Maitreya Palace can't play a big role in the war against Ming cultivation. From this, we can imagine that those soldiers who practice ancient martial arts in the army are no different from dying on such a cruel battlefield. But Yi Tian was not good at attacking General Li Guangzhang's confidence in soldiers' cultivation of ancient martial arts. Thinking so, he said tactfully, General Li doesn't know that these black sands have a magic inhibitory effect on the famous monks, but the same is true for the Terran friars. The Terran friars are within the influence range of the black sands and can exert their magic, so... When Yi Tian said this, General Li Guangzhang hesitated, pointed to the monks who were obviously using their mana to take out the blackened stone from Shumi Ring and lay it everywhere, and said, but I see that their mana has not been affected? Knowing that Li Guangzhang had not given up, Yi Tian smiled and said, yes, but we have a way to eliminate the influence of black sand on mana. However, because this way uses very precious and rare resources, there are not many such resources in the Maitreya Palace. Even the disciples of the palace are not fully equipped, let alone more resources for the ancient martial warriors in the army. Yes. General Li Guangzhang was slightly disappointed. Then his expression became firmer. In any case, the army can't stand by and watch. Our soldiers practicing ancient martial arts can't watch the Maitreya Palace charge on the front line and fight alone. They should always do what they can. Since Princess Yi said so, we don't require those scarce resources. As for how to act, it's up to our army to decide. With that, he was probably worried that Yi Tian would stop him again. General Li Guangzhang saluted Yi Tian straightly, and then turned and left. Yi Tian looked at the back of General Li Guangzhang and silently returned a military salute. A wave of respect came naturally. Although the general is only immortal, the old general, like every iron general, always has soldiers, people and country in his heart. China needs such iron soldiers. Sometimes, knowing that they will die,
they also stand up to the difficulties, regardless of their personal gains and losses. Xianran records the kamikaze sergeant who was outstanding in combat and brave against the enemy. After the war, the palace mainly praised him. Glancing at the busy Xianran in the distance, Yi Tian said loudly. Then, the mind moved. In the sky, the golden eye divine carving fell from the sky and fell to Yi Tian. Yi Tian stepped onto the back of the divine carving. The next moment, he had disappeared from the first war zone. According to the order of the first, second and third war zones, Yi Tian went back for an inspection tour, and finally returned to the seventh war zone he presided over again. After touring the seventh theater, Yi Tian came to an empty place and took out a magic weapon cave again. With the enlargement of the magic weapon cave, he opened the prohibition of the magic weapon cave door and went in. Palace Master Morong, who was busy, looked up at Yi Tian, then began to lower his head and continue to be busy. Choo-choo, how's it going now? Yi Tian asked. Palace Leader, after testing, the first magic weapon cave with 5 times the time field has been arranged. Although there are some small defects in the arrangement process, they have been corrected not long ago. After testing the 5 times the time field, no problems have been found. As he spoke, Morong made a clear gesture, took out an ordinary magic weapon cave from Zumaji and handed it to Yi Tian. Holding this small magic weapon cave in his palm, Yi Tian's mind surged. This magic weapon cave will definitely become the treasure of the Maitreya Palace, one of the most important killing tools, and the takeoff of the Maitreya Palace will rise from this treasure. He quickly recognized the Lord, then opened the magic weapon cave in this huge magic weapon cave and went in. I saw that the magic weapon cave was not completely cleaned up. There was still a wooden frame left inside. There were 5 hourglass hanging on it, and all the sand in it had leaked out. Is it the time to verify with this hourglass? Yi Tian asked. Yes, as like as 2 peas, the 5-hour time field, the magic house of the magic house, has been running down 5 hourglass. The hourglass is the same. The flow rate of the hourglass is the same. This shows that our 5 times time field has been completely arranged successfully. Now we are going to arrange the 5 times time field for the big hole. Tiangong branch and Taisho branch, the large magic weapon cave used to complete the task, we will give priority to arranging 5 times the time field, so that we will have enough time to complete the task assigned by the public palace leader. Okay. Clearly, your arrangement is very reasonable, and this order is exactly what the palace leader thinks. Let me ask you again, how are the other disciples of the field division arranging 5 times the field? Yi Tian said with appreciation. Morong glanced at the hair in front of his forehead and said, arrange the 5 times field. In the whole process, all the disciples in the field participated in all the steps. They have understood some of them, but there are still some deficiencies in the description of some runes. After careful practice, they should be able to complete the description of runes in the future. Next, I'm going to lead all the disciples in the field division to continue to complete the 5 times time of other caves according to the disciples' conjecture. After 10 more time fields, they should be able to roughly complete the layout of 5 times the time field, but some of the field runes still need me to do it myself. 10. Not much. Yi Tian is very satisfied with this result. He has more than 1,000 magic weapon caves, and the original magic weapon caves of Tiangong branch are even more numerous. It will take quite a long time if Morong alone wants to arrange all the magic weapon caves in a 5-time field. Even if he operates in a magic weapon cave in a 5-time field, if the whole field division can undertake most of the tasks of arranging the field, Morong Chuchu only needs to be responsible for completing some complex field runes. Then, things will be much simpler and the speed of arranging the field will be much faster. If Yi Tian's medicine garden cave and his disciples' practice cave can be arranged for 5 times as long, his time will be a lot more. At present, what he lacks most is still time. Okay, clear, that's hard for you. Yi Tian looked at Morong, who was sweating. Then he looked at the many field branch disciples around him and said, all the disciples have worked hard. After the arrangement of the field is over, the leader of the palace will give you some good condolences. Willing to work for the palace master. Yi Tian's words raised his morale to an unprecedented high. Everyone knew that perhaps Yi Tian's understatement of his condolences might be a great opportunity for their disciples. The nearby Morong Chuchu rarely smiled and said, "The palace master is too polite." The whole distribution of Shueiyue sect is saved by the palace master, and the clear brother Morong sword is also saved by the palace master. If there is no palace master, we may have been ghosts in a foreign land.
Well, the family doesn't speak two words. It's clear.
Now it's necessary to pause for some time for common things that take 5 times as long to make.
Yi Tian nodded slightly. Why? Is there something more important than 5 times the time field?
Morong's beautiful Lu Yeme wrinkled gently and asked puzzled.
Yes, you guessed right.
There are more important things than 5 times the time field layout.
Yi Tian nodded slightly.
As he spoke, he motioned and a book appeared in his hand.
The color of this book is old and the pages are yellow.
At first glance, it is an ancient thing. Clearly, you first study the fields recorded in this ancient book, and then I need you to arrange 2 fields to see if you can understand something and meet my final requirements.
Yi Tian said solemnly.
This ancient book is the one given to Yi Tian by on Yuan Mountain.
It records many ancient strange arrays and is extremely precious.
At the beginning, seeing that Yi Tian said so seriously and did not hesitate to stop the layout of the field 5 times, Morong Chuchu still disagreed.
She reluctantly took over the ancient book, opened a few pages and glanced at it.
But in the process, her seemingly casual eyes suddenly coagulated, the gesture of turning the book leaves suddenly stopped, and her eyes fell on a page opened by her. Then, as if the ancient book had endless suction, her eyes stayed there and never moved away. A moment later, she continued to turn a page, looked carefully, and then another page. Then her gestures quickly got up and turned page by page. Before she finished reading, Morong suddenly closed the book and looked up at Yi Tian. There was a strange light flashing in her eyes. "Palace Master, where does this book come from?"
Make the best use of people and things.
Judging from Morong's clear performance, Yi Tian already knows that giving this book to her is definitely a very correct choice. So he smiled and said, "This book was occasionally obtained by an old friend in the past. Because he got some help from me, he gave it to me.
I also benefited a lot from it. Now I give it to you.
I hope you can absorb some nutrients and make the way of the field know to a higher level, so as to become a real and unprecedented field master in all heaven and all regions."
Morong Chuchu blushed a little and said softly, "The expectation of the palace leader is too high.
He is clearly stupid and afraid that he will disappoint the palace leader.
However, I will try my best." Well, what the palace leader needs is your attitude. I believe you will like this ancient book. Yi Tian said with satisfaction.
To be honest, Palace Master, Morong said softly, gently touching the cover of the ancient book, this ancient book of the field is too precious. In the past, I only got some insights from some superficial field texts. However, the field road recorded in this ancient book is broad and profound, vast and mysterious, and the runes inside have the power of seizing heaven and earth. I'm sure this is definitely the most precious book in the field Taoism, isn't it, priceless treasure?
Thank you for your trust. I will try my best to live up to your expectations. Now the princess can say. What kind of field do you need to arrange?
Yi Tian said with a little meditation, I need you to arrange 2 fields.
Listen carefully.
The first one needs you to arrange a field that can send all the dark qi and the fog sea back to the underworld. The palace master also knows that it will be very difficult to arrange this field.
Think carefully and see if it is feasible. Understand, what about the second field? Morong continued with a little meditation.
Yi Tian said, the second kind of field needs an extremely powerful protective field to close the entrance of the underworld. After all the nether qi is sent back to the underworld, all the entrances of the underworld with a radius of about 30 mu can be closed.
If it is only such a field, ordinary defense fields can do it.
But this kind of closed field should be closed for a long time, and the power to be used should be with the help of heaven and earth power and Reiki power, not immortal jade power, at least not using the best immortal jade as the only power. Yi Tiangang had just finished his intention, and Morong was clearly in a state of meditation. Looking at Morong as if he had settled down, Tian motioned the field branch disciples next to him to step aside quietly and don't disturb her meditation, while he waited quietly. Before long, Morong Chuchu finally opened his eyes, looked at Tian and asked, "Palace leader, I have a question.
Is the Ming Qi very useful to the underworld and the Ming cultivation?"
Tian immediately nodded and said, "Naturally, the cultivation of the nether cultivation completely depends on the nether qi. The richer the nether qi is, the faster the cultivation speed of the nether cultivation is, the higher the cultivation achievement is, and the stronger the strength is. If you send all the dark qi on the Earth Star back to the underworld, doesn't it mean to encourage the cultivation of the dark cultivation?" Morong asked clearly for a while. Tian accidentally glanced at Morong Chuchu. She didn't expect Morong Chuchu to say something completely unrelated to the field layout. He nodded slightly and said, "In fact, this is also a helpless move. It is impossible to allow these dark qi to exist on the earth. Then the only place where the dark qi can go is to return to its original place, that is to say, it can only be returned to the underworld. That's what the palace master thinks." Morong thought clearly and said, "Palace leader, haven't you thought about not sending the dark qi into the underworld or staying on the Earth Star, but sealing it in a space and carrying it with you? In this way, you can't break the seal and release these dark qi without giving help to the underworld in cultivation and using the dark cultivation?" Tian shook his head with a bitter smile. "I've thought about this method, and I've thought of two methods. One method is to put the dark qi into the Shumi world, but this operation is very difficult. Unlike melting stones and other magic weapons, the gas can be locked at will. If you want to put it into the Shumi ring, you need countless Shumi rings to hold the dark fog of more than 100,000 miles, and the speed is very slow. This method obviously it won't work. Another way is to use the dark stone. After the mana is input into the dark stone, you can absorb the dark qi. If there is only a small amount of dark qi, this method is indeed simple and effective, but it is also limited by the huge amount of dark qi. More than 100,000 square kilometers of dark qi not only consumes a lot of monks' mana, but also the speed is slow, and we don't have this time. So heavy the dark qi, it's really a helpless move to pour new water into the underworld." "Yes." Hearing Tian finish, Morong Chuchu nodded slightly and fell into meditation again. A moment later, she looked up at Tian again and said, "Palace leader, can you carry the ghost stone you said?" "Of course, there are not only, but also a lot of them." As he spoke, Tian gestured and a pile of dark names appeared in the magic weapon cave. "This kind of dark stone is used by the dark cultivation to assist the cultivation?" Morong stretched out his hand, took a dark stone into his hand, and asked with a play. Tian nodded slightly and said, "Yes, there is pure dark qi in the dark stone. When mana is input into the dark stone, it can release pure dark qi. Of course, the direction of this mana output is input into the dark stone. In another way, if you use mana to urge the dark stone in the opposite direction, you can absorb fame." Tian began to demonstrate as he spoke. He also stretched out his hand and took a dark stone into his hand. Then, he put his palm on the dark stone and spit out his mana slightly. On the dark stone, wisps of pure dark qi came out and floated everywhere. When the dark qi reached a certain concentration, Tian suddenly changed the direction of mana and attracted it to the dark stone. Under the action of magic power, the dark qi in the magic weapon cave was attracted by the dark stone and returned to the dark stone again. The color of the dark stone changed slightly before and after releasing the dark qi. "How wonderful!" Morong murmured clearly, and she tried it herself. Sure enough, as Tian demonstrated, two different mana directions can release and absorb dark qi. After meditating for a moment, Morong Chuchu said with bright eyes again, "I have an idea that there is no need to return Mingming qi to the underworld. If the number of Mingming stones is enough, I will arrange a field to pour all Mingming qi into the underworld stones. I just don't know whether the number of Palace Master's underworld stones is enough." Tian felt a movement in his heart when he heard the speech. If it was true as Morong Chuchu said, it would be the best of both worlds. He said to Morong Chuchu, "You don't have to worry about the problem of the dark stone. I have a huge stock of the dark stone. If the quantity is not enough, the dark monks in the dark fog carry the dark stone. It's also possible to capture it now."
Well, I'll think about these two fields now. There should be results soon.
Please wait for my good news. Morong said excitedly. Deep in the dark fog, mountains and rivers are like a terrible ancient giant beast, crawling in the dark fog, ruthlessly suppressing the entrance of the underworld. 8 Wuhuan puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory stood motionless at the edges of Shanhasil, ready to enter the meditation in the suppression area of Shanhasil at any time. About 78 feet away from the mountains and rivers, more than a dozen were cut in pieces, which had become scattered fragments. The ghost correction of white bones lay there quietly.
It looked particularly gloomy and terrible in the dark fog. These are some white bone Mingxiu who tried to test the power of mountain and river India not long ago. No surprise, they can jump and jump before.
They have stayed here forever. In a dark fog hundreds of feet away from the mountain and river seal, 5 golden bones were gathered together and looked at the direction of the mountain and river seal through the thick black dark fog. Their eyes are also burning flickering and jumping fireworks, which look very strange at any time. After a moment of silence, one of the golden bone Mingxiu said in a hoarse voice, "It can be determined that this big seal is definitely not a mountain and river seal in the two savage spirit domain, but can only be regarded as an imitation at most. But even if it is an imitation, his power is also extremely terrible, especially the 8 human puppets, combined with the magic seal. We really have nothing to do." Another Jingu Mingxiu heard the speech and said slowly.
Jingu Mingxiu, who spoke before, was silent for a moment and said again, "Even if this magic weapon is very powerful, what can it do?"
"I'm afraid there is only one such powerful treasure for the human friar at most.
Since Tian town presses down on the entrance of the underworld, it can't be used to fight. Don't rashly send people to test, it can only be a meaningless sacrifice."
"What should we do?"
"We'll wait here," another Gingyuming interposed. He was also the first Jingu Mingxiu to speak.
He said again, "I've gone out of the fog to test before.
The Terran friar named Tian is really good. He doesn't know where to get so many monsters. The number of human magic weapons is beyond imagination. And the black sand can limit our magic power. I think we'd better not test outside the dark fog. This big seal magic weapon can't be kept here all the time. We are fully prepared. When Tianlai takes back the magic weapon of the Great Seal, we will attack with all our strength. In any case, we must kill him in the dark fog. This is our home."
A nearby Jingu Mingxiu who never spoke suddenly said,
"I'm afraid it's not that simple.
You know, the 2 previous Ming Zuns were killed by Tian's people. In addition to the magic weapon printing, they also have a powerful net magic weapon. Their power is very terrible, which is really impossible to prevent."
Jinguming Xiujia, the first one to speak, smiled strangely, and then said in a hoarse voice, "I didn't laugh at them.
In fact, they were careless and unprepared. Now that we know that Tian has a powerful net magic weapon, we should be more careful in the future.
Please don't be alone.
Take care of each other nearby. Once you find danger, the rest of you must try their best to rescue. There is a way to be a thief for thousands of days. There is no truth to guard against thieves for thousands of days."
"I don't believe it. Tian can stick out all the time? If you don't use the crowd tactics, Tian will be trapped.
As long as he dares to go deep into the dark fog, he can only use this strategy." The last Jingu Mingxiu who never spoke said at this time, "Watch the changes here first and observe the situation. If the other 6 clansmen don't encounter too much resistance, the dark fog will eventually cover the whole Earthstar field. At that time, even if there are 100 leaves, they will certainly die in the dark fog, leaving him dead and ashamed before the snow."
The Mingxiu said in a gloomy voice. Hearing the speech, the rest of the golden bone Mingxiu made a creepy laugh.
"These golden bones have no flesh and blood. When they smile, they are just the upper and lower rows of glittering jaws shaking constantly, and sometimes the sound of teeth colliding.
As soon as you hear it, it is definitely not a human voice."
For all this, the 8 top Wuhuan puppets of Yuanying territory on Shanhasil are not moved at all. It seems that as long as they are not within the scope of Shanhasil suppression, even those golden bones have nothing to do with them. At this time, outside the dark fog, Tian is busy nervously.
Starting from the 7th Defensive Theater, he inspected the first theater one by one.
Arrange the disciples of each defense warzone to clean the battlefield, collect the dead bodies of Mingxiu, look for the stored bones, count the booty and take out all the Mingxia they carry. Originally, Yi Tian wanted to wait until all the important things were finished, and then find a suitable opportunity to clean the battlefield. Even if these things of Shenzhou were directly thrown away, it doesn't matter as long as they don't fall into the hands of Mingxiu again. But now, since these dark stones still have an effect on the human friars, Yi Tian will not let go. As the saying goes, be prepared, so you can't take it out when you are in urgent need. During the inspection, when passing the fourth war zone, Yi Tian found Situ Juanru and brought him 10,000 disciples of the Maitreya Palace. He asked Situ Shinru to arrange those disciples who have tasks to join the defensive camp. Unless they had to, they must continue to complete the tasks assigned by Yi Tian at the relay of the magic weapon cave. In this trial battle, Yi Tian saw the powerful effect of thunder. This explosive consumption magic weapon is very suitable for some low-level friars. Detonating the thunderbolt does not require too high mana requirements, but the powerful lethality is obvious to all and cannot be ignored. Yi Tian wants to have more thunderbolts as much as possible. After all, except for the Ghost Cave in northern Xinjiang, there are 6 foggy seas overseas. Although it does not belong to the scope of China, if we do not make preparations early, once the 6 fog seas are connected together, they will form a scale. The nether cultivation of the underworld can still enter the Earth Star from those entrances, and the spearhead will point at China in the end. At that time, I'm afraid the scope of the dark fog has reached an unimaginable level, and it's impossible to prevent it. More importantly, in the previous battle, except for some dead and injured monsters, the disciples of Maitreya Palace did not die in the battle, only a few injured. To achieve such a great victory, on the one hand, the realm of spiritual cultivation dispatched by the underworld side is not very strong. On his side, there are not only martial spirit puppets, but also hundreds of thousands of demons and beasts, but also the assistance of transforming ordinary stones, so that the side of the Maitreya Palace has the upper hand. However, all this is difficult to avoid close combat between the disciples of the Maitreya Palace and the Ming clan. In the fierce battle between the two sides, the most fundamental reason for the low casualty rate is the armor that plays a decisive role. Whether it's dragon armor, black dragon armor, or even the lowest level Tinglong armor, it has dissolved the attack of Mingxiu to varying degrees. It virtually reduces the attack power of Mingxiu, but not all the disciples of the Maitreya Palace are equipped with such life-saving armor. Yi Tian urgently needs the Heavenly Work Division to continue to refine a large number of armor to arm the disciples of the palace and protect their safety to the greatest extent. As for the treasure clothes that can dissolve the ashes and melt the stones, of course, the more the better for Yi Tian. Refining the treasure clothes is also one of the important tasks assigned by Yi Tian. Most importantly, in order to close the entrance to the underworld, Yi Tian specially arranged one of the most important refining tasks for Situ Juanru. Therefore, when the Tiangong division continues to complete these tasks, it appears that the defense force is insufficient. Yi Tian brought people here. In his busy life, time passed bit by bit. About 2 hours later, Yi Tiangang just returned to the 7th theater. Morong ran out of a magic weapon cave excitedly. While running, he shouted loudly as if there were no one else, "Palace Master." Seeing the excited look on Morong Chuchu's face, Yi Tian's eyes couldn't help brightening. His body flashed and flew towards Morong Chuchu. "Chuchu, how's it going? Is there any progress?" "Palace leader, I'm lucky to live up to my life. I've finished all these 2 fields," Morong said excitedly. "Okay, don't worry. Go to the magic weapon cave and say it in detail." Yi Tian also excitedly patted Morong's clear shoulder, took her and strode to the magic weapon cave. "Well, now you can talk about your ideas." After entering the magic weapon cave, the two sides had no time to sit down, and Yi Tian hurriedly said, "Yes, Palace Leader, let's talk about the first field first, that is, the field that absorbs the dark chi into the dark stone and stores it, so as to eliminate the Earth Star's dark chi. The disciple has found a solution to this field, but this field will cost a lot of best fairy jade," Morong said directly. Yi Tian nodded slightly and said, "As the teacher has said, there is no problem. Let's talk about your field principle in detail." The disciple wants to use a yin-yang reversal field to generate powerful mana in the field.
He uses the power of the best fairy jade to convert the power into mana and then act on the dark stone. Due to the reversal of yin-yang, the effect on the dark stone is equivalent to the monk urging the dark stone. In this way, the dark chi can be continuously absorbed into the dark stone.
Only the disciple did some experiments and made a single piece. The amount of nether chi that the nether stone can hold is very limited, so the number of nether stones needed for this method is much larger than expected, Morong said clearly.
Tian smiled gently. Okay. The best fairy jade and dark stone are not a problem. As long as you can be sure that this field is effective for absorbing dark chi, let's do it.
The palace leader, after all, has not arranged the field, and has not seen the actual field power in effect, but according to my guess, there should be a success rate of more than 90%.
Morong said clearly.
Tian nodded with satisfaction. Don't say 90% success rate, that is to reach more than 50%, you can let go and have a try.
Let's talk about the situation of the second field.
Palace Master, in fact, the second field is not a single field, but a serial field used by two fields together. One field uses a small amount of top-grade fairy jade as micro-energy to convert heaven and earth power and Reiki power into field power. After realizing the conversion of this power, it is provided to the real defense field. This defense field adopts the ancient book given to me by the Palace Master in Ancient Field.
Morong Chuchu immediately introduced, there is a field named Tiangu mentioned in the ancient books. This is the strongest defense field that disciples can master at present.
However, from the field mentioned in the ancient books, disciples occasionally inspired and made some small changes. After arranging the Tiangu field, the defense ability produced by the field should be about 10% to 20% stronger than that recorded in the ancient books.
Heaven prisoner?
Hearing that Morong Chuchu was talking about this field, Tian couldn't help smiling. It was really such a coincidence. This field immediately increased his confidence, but he was shocked by Morong Chuchu's words.
He couldn't help asking with his eyes, can you change this ancient strange array?
You should know that this field has been handed down from ancient times and has been tested by countless real guns. It has almost reached a very perfect level. It is extremely difficult to change it at all. Unexpectedly, Morong Chuchu could find and improve the imperfections of the Heaven Prisoner field in this moment, which is not enough to be described as genius. If you have to describe it, it can only be a peerless genius. Of course, when the disciple studied the Heaven Prisoner field, he found that those defects were obvious. In fact, they were not difficult to find, and it was quite easy to change.
Morong said with a smile.
From her pure eyes, Tian felt that she didn't lie and didn't have any affectation.
This makes Tian feel very speechless.
Perhaps in Tian's own opinion, they are all perfect fields, but in Morong's clear eyes, the defects are so obvious.
This is the difference between genius and peerless genius.
Tian thinks that his attainments in the field are also quite extraordinary, but compared with the two, Morong Chuchu is obviously much better than himself. He did not ask in detail about the specific principles of the two fields and what kind of rune layout to use. Since he believed that Morong was clear and she had such attainments, Tian believed that there should be no big mistakes. In fact, if you think about it, the power of any field and the effect that can be achieved can only be tested after the real field is actually arranged. If it is just on paper, it will always be empty and cannot get a truly credible conclusion.
No matter what the final result is, we always have to try to know.
Even if we can't find out the failure at one time, we also have valuable experience for the subsequent field layout. What Tian needs to consider is how to ensure the smooth arrangement of the site and the personal safety of those who arrange the site. Clearly, you should carefully sort out the details and processes needed to arrange these two fields.
See what materials you need.
Pay attention to details to ensure that everything is safe. Thinking so, Tian asked. Palace Master, I've sorted out all the details and processes.
In fact, it's conservative to say that I'm 90% sure. If there's no accident, I should be sure of success.
As for the materials needed, the materials for arranging the time field given to me by the Palace Master are enough.
How many hands do you need? Tian asked with a bitter smile.
I felt very speechless about Morong Chuchu's answer one day. I was still thinking so in my heart before.
Now I was given back by Morong Chuchu immediately. But at this time, he had no right to speak. Morong clearly said that it was natural to be able. Just arrange these two fields. The disciples can take the disciples of the field division with them. Next, the disciples will use a period of time to explain the key points of arranging the field, so as to increase the accuracy and speed during the arrangement. Morong Chu said again. Yi Tian nodded slightly. Well, let's start now. With that, Yi Tian stepped out of the magic weapon government and came to the door of the cave. He habitually took out 4 martial spirit puppets from Shumi Ring to guard the magic weapon cave. For such a baby as Morong Chu, we must ensure her personal safety. Leaving the magic weapon cave, Yi Tian paced slowly outside the fog sea and thought carefully. How can we ensure that this trip is safe? In addition, the two fields, which field is arranged first and which field is arranged later, need to be carefully considered. Time passed bit by bit. After more than an hour, Yi Tian's frown gradually stretched out. What he considered was finally decided in his heart. In the rest of the war area, disciples from the Maitreya Palace came to send Yi Tian the captured dark stone. Palace leader, I'm already here. All the disciples of the field division are fully familiar with the field layout process. Just follow the command when arranging, and you can arrange the field required by the palace leader. Now you can start at any time. At one moment, Morong came out of the magic weapon cave and said to Yi Tian. Yi Tian gently waved his hand and said, You can adjust your breath and adjust your state to the best state. I'm still waiting for something. Hearing the speech, Morong Chu nodded slightly and returned to the cave again. After more than 3 hours of waiting, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky. Lightning generally flew here quickly. Yi Tian looked happy, looked up and saw. The visitor is Situ Juanru. He tried his best to control the flying sword of the half-immortal soldier, and fell to Yi Tian. Master, didn't you delay your important event, said Situ Juanru, handing Yi Tian a Shumi ring. Shumi ring has been erased by Situ Juanru. Yi Tian takes the ring, quickly marks his own mind, and then probes into it. Soon, he nodded with satisfaction and said, Well done, old 17. You spend much less time than you judge as a teacher. This time, when you enter the dark fog, in order to avoid accidents, all war zones must be careful to defend. There can be no accidents. Hurry back here. Yes, Master, do you need to bring more martial spirit puppets? Situ Juanru asked as he promised. Yi Tian shook his head. No, it's enough to be a martial spirit puppet on the teacher. After Situ Juanru left, Yi Tian used a cup of tea to explain his defense to Ko Yuanchuan and Duan Jingxiu. Later, 600 puppets of the late Wu Soul in Yuanying territory were left. If he is not here, the defensive forces in the 7th Theater will become relatively weak, and he has to make some necessary arrangements. After everything is done, Yi Tian comes to Morong's magic weapon cave. Palace leader, can you start now? Morong asked eagerly. She can't wait to arrange those two fields. Yi Tian looked at Morong Chu with an obvious urgent expression on his face and smiled and said, Of course, I'll take you into the fog sea this time to complete the layout of the field. Next, it's up to you. Lin Yichuan, the leader of the field division, immediately said, I will die to complete the task assigned by the palace leader. The disciples of other field branches also made a promise, and the scene became warm for a moment. Looking at these fighting disciples, Yi Tian nodded with satisfaction, but said, Death is impossible, as long as you finish the task well. You are all the pillars of the Maitreya Palace, and the leader of the palace will not let you miss anything. All the disciples below enter the magic weapon cave and are ready to go to the entrance of the underworld. As he spoke, Yi Tianxiao pointed to the cave where the magic weapon with 5 times the time field was arranged, and the disciples of the field branch immediately entered the cave according to his words. Morong Chu didn't act immediately. She came to the gate of the magic weapon cave and looked outside. She didn't see other strong men of the Maitreya Palace standing outside the door waiting. She asked suspiciously, Lord Yi, are you the only one who took us deep into the dark fog? Yi Tian smiled and asked, Otherwise? Who do you think you want to take? Your sister? Or Morong's sword? Morong clearly bit his lips and looked like he wanted to talk and stop. Yi Tian asked with an eyebrow, Clearly, it doesn't hurt to say anything directly. Well, Palace Master, I'll tell you directly. Morong Choo-Choo, as if he had made a great determination, bit his lips and said, there are too many nether practitioners in the nether fog. I'm afraid there will be too many dangers for the Palace Master to go alone. It's better to take more strong people and take care of them. Hearing that Morong Choo-Choo was actually because of this, Tian couldn't help laughing. Choo-Choo, you don't have to worry, I'm enough alone. Morong asked with some uncertainty, can the Palace Master have enough assurance? Don't let those dark practices take us away. Our lives are small. The safety of the Earth Star is related to the future of the Maitreya Palace. We can't make any mistakes. Tian smiled again, I'm not stupid. There's no reason to die for nothing. Well, I know that the Palace Master is invincible. Since the Palace Master is so confident, I should have enough confidence. I won't say another word. With that, Morong turned and stepped into the magic weapon cave. Tian then hit the magic weapon cave with a magic power.
The magic weapon cave quickly became smaller. Tian stretched out his hand and sent it to Shumi Ring. Then his hand moved and his hands were. Hold his 5 shaped beads. With a gentle urging of mana, the 5 elements sent out a faint light and shrouded in the whole body. At the next moment, Tian's body suddenly flashed and disappeared from the magic weapon cave out of thin air. He was not sure whether there was a high-level meditation in the fog to monitor the situation on his side, so he took a very cautious way to enter the fog sea. Tian, who was tens of feet underground, stopped for a while and took out the UFO from Zumaji. He just flashed and reached the UFO. As the passport opened, it urged the 5 elements of beads, and the flying saucer drew a bright light, flew forward quickly and fled towards the depths of the fog sea. While flying underground, Tian observed the situation on the ground with his heavenly eyes. Above is still a thick dark fog, which looks boundless and endless. There are countless nether practitioners shuttling back and forth, patrolling and guarding. It seems that those Mingxiu didn't notice that the UFO magic weapon was flying fast underground. With 5 elements of beads in hand and underground, Tian is the king who will never lose. After entering the later stage of the Golden Elixir realm, his mana sword, and the time to drive the 5 elements out was also greatly extended, which was enough to support him until he came to the entrance of the underworld. In addition to observing the meditation in the fog sea, he also observed the entrance direction of the underworld. A moment later, through Yuan Tian's eyes, in the fog sea, the familiar peaks were looming. Tian had firmly remembered the position of the eye of the underworld before, so he slightly adjusted the direction, and the flying saucer ran straight to the entrance of the underworld. At the edge of the entrance to the underworld, the speed of the UFO gradually slowed down. At a certain moment, the UFO stopped and Tian got off the UFO. He flashed out and hit this flying magic weapon with a magic power. After shrinking, he was included in Shumi Ring. In the dark fog, the huge mountain and river seal is still suppressed at the entrance of the underworld, and the 8 Wuling puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory are still guarding the edges of the mountain and river seal. Suddenly, the figure in front flashed, and Tian flew out of the ground and landed on the mountain and river seal. When Tian suddenly appeared, the 8 Yuanying silent peak martial spirit puppets who had stood motionless on the edge of mountain and river seal suddenly turned their heads and looked at Tian. Seeing that it was the master, they immediately turned their heads as if nothing had happened, continued to maintain a defensive state and stared out of the dark fog. Tianxia ignored the 8 ghost puppets. He stood on the mountain and river seal and looked at the distance with burning eyes. There was a white bone Mingxiu. When he found the sudden appearance of Tian, he immediately turned and fled. There were many other white bone netherworld practitioners around this white bone netherworld practitioner. When he found Tian, he immediately slowly retreated back. It seems that Tian is deeply afraid that he will rush out of the mountain and river in the next moment and use thunder to kill them all. Tianling snorted and ignored the white bone nether cultivation of these minions. He motioned, and the magic weapon cave appeared on the mountain and river seal. With the rapid amplification of the magic weapon cave, Tian hit the prohibition of the magic weapon cave gate with his magic power. At the next moment, Morong Choo-Choo and many field branch disciples came out quickly. Because Morong knew that all these people were wearing treasure clothes, the power of mountain and river seal had no impact on them and could act as usual.
Palace leader, this is the depths of the fog sea. Is it here so soon? Morong stopped at the gate of the magic weapon cave, looked around and observed the surrounding environment.
As a friar, she is naturally sensitive to six senses and can see things at night. The night can't stop their sight, but the dark chi here is too strong, and her sight can only see within 10 meters.
This kind of environment makes people feel depressed invisibly. Yes, this is the deep fog. The mountains and rivers at your feet suppress the entrance to the underworld. You should stop breathing.
Although inhaling a small amount of underworld chi will not have too much impact on yourself. But if you inhale too much, it will still be harmful to your body. In serious cases, it will affect your cultivation and strength.
Yi Tian reminded.
When they heard the speech, they immediately stopped breathing as Yi Tian said. At this time, Yi Tian suddenly looked up to the distance. In the fog sea, the 5 golden figures suddenly flashed and appeared in the range of his sight. The 5 golden bones did not continue to be close to the mountain and river seal, but stood 30 or 40 meters outside the influence range of the mountain and river seal and stopped here to stare.
Yi Tian, how did you get in? Why didn't the venerable master notice?
Just now you were still outside the fog sea, one of the golden bone Mingxiu asked hoarsely with a bright and dark flame flashing in his eyes.
Yi Tianling snorted and said, "Are you retarded? With your IQ, do you still want to play the idea of Earthstar? Do you think your life is too long?"
Jin Guming's self-cultivation is the respect of the Ming, which is equivalent to the existence of a great monk in the Jade and Pu territory of the human race.
He has great power and transcendent status in the Ming family.
He has never been so ridiculed.
Yi Tian. You want to die, the golden bone Mingxiu shouted angrily, and a golden bone sword in his hand flashed and shot at Yi Tian.
In his rage, Jin Gu Mingxiu suddenly shot his hand. Until the golden bone sword in his hand burst out, he suddenly remembered that the square seal at the foot of Yi Tian had a strong gravity field.
I'm afraid I'll come back in vain.
But it was too late for him to withdraw the golden bone sword. The golden ancient sword just shot into the coverage of the mountain river seal gravity field. The speed slowed down suddenly, and finally stopped and suspended in the dark fog.
How's it going? Are you stupid?
Yi Tian looked at the Jingu Mingxiu, who was on the verge of losing ground, mocked and smiled, and stretched out his hand to move towards the golden bone sword. It was strange that the golden bone sword seemed to get rid of the suppression of the mountain river seal gravity field in an instant, and was easily recruited by Yi Tian. He shook the high-quality golden bone sword in his hand, and Yi Tian looked at the 5 golden bones in the distance. Come on, let's do whatever else we have. Ming Zun, who had lost his golden bone sword, kept flickering and shaking 2 flames in his eyes, as if he was extremely angry.
But he didn't continue his reckless action. He just stared at Yi Tian and sent out this gloomy cold, Yi Tian, if one day you fall into your own hands, you will be broken to pieces. Yi Tian laughed and said, there are many people who say such things to Yi, but they are all the broken bodies. Yi is still standing here. Let's wait and see who can laugh to the end. Yi Tian said something in motion to send the golden bone sword into Shumi Ring. Then a magic power hit the empty magic weapon cave and put it away. He took a look at many netherworld practitioners in the distance, and without any influence, he defeated the magic weapon print again. The magic weapon print with an area of 40 or 50 mu slowly rose from the ground, separated from the eyes of the underworld, and flew vertically up from the ground. In such a situation, the gold bone Mingxiu in the distance suddenly laughed. Yi Tian, you can't stand it at last? Although this magic seal can block the entrance of the underworld, you can't gamble like this all the time. Is it very insecure without such a magic weapon? As Jingu Mingxiu said, his 2 thin bone arms swung back and began to retreat slowly. Seeing the retreat signal sent by the Pluto, the rest of the golden bone Pluto and white bone Pluto also withdrew slowly with him. They were frightened by the powerful repression of the magic seal. They were worried that Yi Tian would suddenly make a move. This time, Yi Tian went deep into the fog sea and had a more important task than killing Mingxiu. Naturally, he won't fight with those Mingxiu at this time. Looking at those Mingxiu who are getting farther and farther, Yi Tian just snorted coldly and ignored them.
Instead, he continued to manipulate the magic seal to fly slowly to the low altitude. Without the suppression of the magic seal, the eye of the underworld gurgled and gushed out of the sky again, and quickly spread around. The next moment, the magic seal that rose to the sky suddenly stopped in the air.
Tian gestured and took out the zumaji given to him by Situ Juanru.
Then the divine mind went into it and locked the only magic weapon inside. The next moment, a dark shadow flew out of Shumi ring, quickly enlarged, turned into a black cylinder with a diameter of 40 or 50 mu, and suddenly fell down, just covering the entrance to the underworld that was released.
With a loud bang, this cylindrical magic weapon thicker than the mountain and river seal suddenly fell on the eye of the underworld, shaking the nearby ground. This cylindrical magic weapon once again covers the entrance of the underworld tightly. Tian asked Situ Juanru to make this treasure with all his strength.
It was made of Huathan stone as the main material, supplemented by other solid heaven and earth treasures.
Tian gave it a domineering name. Zhenming Stone. This Zhenming Stone is extremely heavy. Ordinary people without mana can't shake a penny even if 10,000 people push it at the same time. The main material for refining this stone.
Huathan stone has the magical effect of limiting the monk's mana. Under the influence of this stone, no matter the Terran friar or the nether monk, they can't exert half of their mana. Unless they wear a special treasure coat made of Shenin stone, they cannot be affected. It is really impossible for Tian to use Shan Yin to suppress the entrance of the underworld for a long time. After some reflection, he decided to replace Shan Yin to continue to suppress the entrance of the underworld. In addition to suppressing the entrance of the underworld, this Shinling water also has another effect that Tian wants to achieve most. That is to protect the field array to be arranged next. Without this stone, even with the strong defense of the heaven prisoner field, I'm afraid that after a long time, with the cultivation of many strong people in the underworld, I can finally crack this field. But now, with the help of the Zhenming stone, even the powerful people in the underworld, no matter how deep they are, can't play their magic role. Naturally, they can't pose any threat to the arranged field. The Zhenming stone falls and seals the entrance of the underworld. Tian made a careful observation around the round black Zhenming stone, and did not find a trace of netherchi seeping out from the eyes of the underworld. He nodded with satisfaction and said clearly to Morong, "Now you can start to arrange the field." The two linked fields should be arranged around this Zhenming stone. Morong looked away from the Zhenming stone slowly and said happily, "The palace master is a good way." At the beginning, the disciples were worried that the field would be attacked by the underworld. Unexpectedly, the palace master used this method to suppress the magic power of the underworld cultivation again. In this way, the improved heaven prisoner field must be safe. After that, Morong waved his hand and said to the disciples of the field branch, "Prepare immediately and arrange the field immediately." Then people took materials, and those who took Xianyu took Xianyu. Others began to measure the size around Zhenming stone. Everyone was busy one after another. Tian controlled the mountain and river seal to fall slowly and waved with a gesture. Tens of thousands of best products met and fell on the Zhenming stone. With such a field, Tian naturally wouldn't let those disciples pay for themselves. Then, he controlled the magic seal and was a little far away from the Zhenming stone. He summoned more than 600 martial spirit puppets around him at one time and surrounded Morong Chuchu and the disciples of the field division. Morong clearly said that she would arrange two fields here to form a chain field and seal the entrance of the underworld. The layout of the two sites takes quite a long time. Tian can let go of the layout of the site, but he must ensure that Morong is clear and the disciples are safe. 5 Mingxiu, who had retreated hundreds of feet away, stood there and kept looking at Tian's position. "What does Tian want?" one of the golden bones asked in a puzzled voice. Another Jingu Mingxiu said, "It's a very simple thing." Tian replaced the magic seal with another treasure and covered the entrance of the underworld. What they should do now is to arrange a field to continue to close the eyes of the underworld. Ha ha ha. Jingu Mingxiu, who had spoken before, suddenly laughed. "Yi naive is stupid. Doesn't he know that there are 7 entrances to the underworld? What if one is sealed?" The nearby golden bone Mingxiu snorted coldly and said, "What do you think will happen if he seals all the 7 entrances to the underworld one by one?"
Can't it? Jin Gumingshu, who spoke before, said in amazement, how can he have so many magic weapons against the sky? Can he seal all the 7 entrances to the underworld?
I hope so too, but I have to guard against it, said Jin Gumingshu next to me.
How to prevent?
Jin Guming, who had just spoken, asked, is it right here to watch?
Watch him seal the entrance? How could it be? I have a clever plan. Yi Tian and his gang can only block all directions to China, but there are no friars outside China. We just need to send a messenger to ask for help at another entrance.
If we attack ordinary Chinese people unexpectedly, Yi Tian doubts that he will save them, so all his arrangements here will be wasted and will not work. It has no effect, said the Golden Bone Ming Shou Jie with a strange smile.
Good plan. You'll arrange it now, the Gold Bone Ming Shou Jie nearby said with a strange smile.